What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well. Today I've got for you some of the very best pro-revenge Reddit stories of the last 365 days compiled into one epic movie-length episode for you. Now, I've said it for a long time. I think that revenge stories are some of the most interesting and sort of satisfying stories on the internet and on Reddit. Just the level, the depth that we go to in these stories that span decades is sort of incomparable, in my opinion. And that is why I love revenge stories. So I've hand selected some of the very best from 2024. They're all going to be in this episode. Let's get into it. Make sure you're subscribed, by the way. Come on. Let's go. Got rude guy arrested for suspended license. In the mid-2000s, my friends and I would frequent a small billiards place in a neighboring town where you could rent a table by the hour or play per game. We'd play a few games, watch whatever sports were on TV, and have casual conversations. There were no problems and no drama until about 3 months of us visiting this place. A guy shows up and takes our spot at the billiards table. No big deal, we were all chatting anyway. 20 minutes later, my friend lets him know that we want to play the next game, but this jerk is super dismissive. Needless to say, we didn't get in during the next game, so I politely let him know we wanted to play next. Another lady chimed in that she wanted the game after us. The guy blatantly ignored me and the other woman. Some more time goes by and the guy leaves the table. We see our chance to get in. We put the quarters in and the balls are dispensed, except the green 6 ball. The guy took it to the bathroom with him. At this point it was ridiculous and we notified the manager. The manager noted it was 12:30 and they were going to be calling last call and closing, so we didn't want to make a scene by kicking him out. He gets us another ball so that we can play. The guy comes out of the bathroom and knows that we realized what he did. He smirks and proceeds to the patio to have a cigarette, bringing along his beer and the green billiard ball. The guy comes back in and tossed the ball he was holding onto the table, hitting a few balls on it and messing up our game. He goes up to the bar just in time for last call. One of the friends I was with suggested we follow him home and each call the highway patrol to report a suspected drunk driver. 3 of 4 of us agree. So when he leaves, we used our trusty Nextel push-to-talk phones and coordinated several calls to the police. We provided details like license plate, vehicle make and model and color, and mentioned the car nearly hit another vehicle, was swerving between lines and driving erratically. This was under a 15-minute plan. We had no idea where the guy lived, but suspected it was close as he was visiting a neighborhood place, so our time was limited. The one guy who didn't notify the police tailed the jerk and called us giddy when a police officer pulled between him and the guy and turned on his lights to pull him over. The police blotter that week included an arrest of a guy who was pulled over after multiple calls of erratic driving. He wasn't arrested for DWI, but instead for driving on a suspended license. Well, there we go. Dealt with phenomenally well. I'm actually quite interested to know how this guy wasn't done for drink driving. Maybe he did just have a couple of drinks and that was all. But still, I'm not sure I'd necessarily advocate that, even though it's within the limit just about. But yeah, good to see that you guys got some justice, because what kind of guy does this? I mean, seriously. Like, fair enough if you want to play an extra game. I mean, is that even fair? I'm not sure. You know, if you want to play 2 games and you say to people, listen, I know that you're waiting, but I really just want to play another game. No, I mean, even then, you should just give the table up. Sorry, you should. But then what he did after that, taking the green ball to the toilet. I mean, what? I've never heard of someone doing that. And then ruining the game, the next game, by chucking it on the table just for the sake of it. Why? I think he deserves to be arrested just for that pettiness and just being a jerk in general. Good revenge. Okay, that's going to do it for the first story of revenge in this episode. Let's move on to the second. Now, I want to give a little bit of context here because it might seem like it's a little bit boring and professional and mundane. But trust me, this isn't one of those. It's really, really good and the justice is excellent. It's definitely one of the most well-written pieces that I've read in a while. And it's about someone that we all kind of hate, right? Landlords. I think we can all generally agree that landlords aren't the best. They're sometimes extremely difficult to work with and yeah, deal with. But you may think that residential landlords are bad. Actually, in this situation, we have a story about a commercial landlord who is absolutely horrible. Without further ado, let's get into it. A lawyer's pro-revenge on a landlord. Landlords are jerks, generally speaking. Everyone knows that. But if you think residential landlords are bad, they are nothing compared to commercial landlords. Landlords of commercial buildings are some of the cruelest, nastiest people I've ever come across. This revenge tale is about a commercial landlord and how I dealt with him. Back in the 90s, sometimes I'd go for lunch at this restaurant in the basement of our building. The place was called The Vault because it had a massive bank vault that had always been there, dating back to the days before the place was turned into a restaurant. The vault was so huge that they could see a couple of tables in there, and you could eat dinner surrounded by rows of old, gleaming safe deposit boxes. One day I was there for lunch and the owner took me aside. "The landlord's driving me nuts," he said. "The landlord drives everyone nuts." I was a subtenant in the same building, sharing space with an old lawyer, Aaron, and the landlord was always causing us trouble. I'd already had a few run-ins with him and we hated each other on site. In most jurisdictions, commercial landlords don't need court orders to get you out. Instead, they just change the locks and you find out about it when you show up and your key doesn't work. Every time our landlord had a dispute with anyone, which was often, he'd always threaten to change the locks. He keeps demanding all this stuff for extra rent, and it's really weird because a lot of it's really old. The restaurant owner showed me a letter the landlord had served on him earlier that day. I looked over the demand and read a list of expenses for snow removal and parking lot repair and common area flooring and all kinds of trash going back years. I read it all the way to the end, and there it was. The usual clause saying he was going to change the locks if the tenant didn't pay this and do that. From the wording of the demand, it looks like you've been fighting a while. Why did you wait before consulting a lawyer? I asked one of the lawyers I know and he said it's hopeless. He told me the lawyer's name. It was a guy I knew with a trashy real estate practice who had resorted to taking little legal aid cases to keep the lights on when the market tanked in '89. "Did you do something to make the landlord hate you?" I asked. Because this is a bit over the top, even for our jerk landlord. "He knows I'm moving the restaurant. I think he's trying to grab as much money as possible before I go. Plus, he's giving me grief over the vault." "He won't let you take it with you?" "Are you kidding? It weighs almost 100 tons and I don't need it. But the lease says I have to remove it and that I also have to restore the building to what it was before there was a vault. That would cost a fortune. The jerk landlord says if I leave the vault behind when I move, he'll sue." "Send your lease up to my office and let me look it over," I said. I finished my lunch and when I got back to my office, the lease was waiting for me. It was just as bad as the restaurant owner said. The lease was a renewal of a renewal of an assignment of a renewal, the original documents dating back to shortly after World War II when a bank first leased the place and the vault was installed. Somehow, the landlord had suckered the restaurant into taking over a lease that left him liable to remove a bank vault at the end of the term. That is crazy. No big deal, I thought. The restaurant can default and all the landlord can do is sue a shell company. But when I got to the last page of the lease, there was a guarantee clause. The restaurant owner had personally guaranteed the lease and he was on the hook for removing a vault weighing 100 tons and then fixing the place up. It would cost a fortune. To be fair, moral of the story so far is you've got to read the contract in full for anything like this because, wow, being personally liable for a 100-ton vault is crazy. The case was hopeless, of course. That was obvious right away. But then I thought about the jerk landlord with his demands and his threats and his rent hikes, and I asked my brain to do me a solid, which it promptly did. I picked up the phone and called the restaurant owner. "I'm screwed, right? You're calling me to say there's no way out. That's what my commercial lawyer already said, but I just thought I'd ask." "Well, I can save you, but it's going to cost." "How much?" $5,000 in legals and another G note for the agent. "Agent? What kind of agent?" "Real estate. Send up a check, certified, and leave the rest to me." The check hit my desk in less than an hour. I went to Aaron's office. "I need a real estate agent," I said. "You buying a house?" "Nope." "Selling a house?" "Nope." By this point, I'd been sharing space with Aaron for almost 5 years and he knew me pretty well. "You pulling one of your stunts again?" he asked. "Yep, but nothing that will get you into trouble." "Alright, I know a guy." Aaron knew all kinds of guys, and that's one of the reasons he eventually got disbarred. But he knew a guy, and he gave me the agent's name and number, and the next day I paid the agent a visit. I told him what I needed, and we agreed to terms. I gave him some papers and the cash for his fee. A few days later, I was again at the vault for lunch. The owner saw me walk in and greeted me himself. "The landlord's here," he said. "Why?" "For lunch, and to be a jerk. Let's sit in the vault room so I don't have to look at his face." He took me to the vault room, and with the door almost completely closed, we had a consultation while we ate pasta and drank red wine. That's pretty elite, by the way, I've got to say. Imagine that. Sitting in a vault, having pasta, drinking red wine. That's like movie scene right there, but I guess the circumstances aren't great, to be honest. So I said, we're making demand on the landlord, munching on spaghetti carbonara. Demand? What are we demanding? I pulled a document out of my briefcase and passed it to him while I sipped my wine. We're demanding that the jerk landlord release all the restaurant equipment, all the fixtures, the ovens, the freezers, the ventilation, everything you need to run a restaurant. The lease exempts all that stuff. He can't stop me taking what I want. The only thing that matters is the vault, and of course, I don't want that. But I shook my head. You need the vault, I said. And we're demanding that he release the bank vault as well. We're insisting that he let you take it out within 7 business days. You think you can beat the landlord with reverse psychology? You think if you treat him like a 2-year-old, you can manipulate him into doing what you want? Well, we'll find out soon enough. He's had the demand for a couple of days now. The restaurant owner dropped his wine glass and it shattered on the marble floor. You already gave it to him, he said. He got up, swung open the vault door, and called for the waiter to clean up the mess. Let's see what the landlord has to say, I told him, and we walked over to the landlord's table. The landlord was a big, beefy man with a big appetite. He sat alone, eating wolfishly and with his hands. My client needs an answer today, I said. The landlord looked up at me as he chewed noisily. I'm the vault's lawyer, I said. I gave you a demand the other day. My client needs an answer right now. He needs the vault for a new place and he's got to make arrangements. Your client could forget about the bank vault, he said, wiping his massive greasy hands on an already soiled napkin. But you can't do that, I said. My shock was feigned, but the restaurant owner's jaw dropped for real. The landlord laughed at us. I'm the landlord. I can do what I want. I'm going to need that in writing because my client might sue, I said. Sue all you like, the landlord told me. Sue till you're blue in the face. He told me that I'd have a formal response by the day's end, and then he told me to go away and let him finish his lunch. When the letter arrived from the landlord, claiming ownership over the bank vault, I brought it downstairs and showed it to my client. How the heck did you do that? Trade secret, I said. The following month, the restaurant moved out and the place was empty, and that was too bad because I'd always liked eating at the vault. Now the restaurant was in a new location 20 minutes away. They called the new place the Vault, and they'd preserved the vibe of the old place. It was very similar, except they didn't have the bank vault. The bank vault, all 100 tons of it, was where it had always been, in the basement of the building where I rented space. I showed up for work a little after that, and Aaron collared me. The landlord's looking for you, he said. Oh yeah? What about? He's really angry. He said his deal fell through. Deal? He was supposed to rent the place downstairs to a new tenant, a bank or a credit union or something like that. They were supposed to come in to sign a lease, but they didn't show up. And what's that got to do with me? I said to Aaron. And I said the same thing again to the landlord when he managed to track me down a couple of days later. I know you were behind this, he said, his jowls quivering. I know it was you. That offer from the agent, it was all BS. Just a trick to make me keep the vault so that your client could sneak out of the place and leave that freaking bank vault behind. I'm gonna sue. If you're looking for counsel, I think I'm gonna have to declare a conflict. I'm gonna sue the restaurant and that agent, and I'm gonna sue you. He stormed off. But the landlord didn't sue. Of course he didn't. He didn't have a contract to sue on, only a vague letter of intent that I drafted, enough to hook a greedy landlord who was used to having his way. The offer he'd received was non-binding, incapable of acceptance without the signing of a formal lease, which of course never got signed. When I left Aaron's place a year later, the downstairs was still unoccupied, with a sad for rent sign sitting in the window, starting to look faded. So there we go. That is without a doubt one of the best revenge stories I've read in a long time. That was brilliant from beginning to end. What might have been potentially a kind of boring topic, you know, landlords and contracts and that sort of stuff, maybe not the most entertaining, so well written and really good. This guy clearly is just a horrible, greedy man that, yeah, any sort of idea of, oh, can I make some more money from a new bank potentially coming in? He was all for it, not even checking if they were even a real bank in the first place or doing any sort of due diligence there and working out what was going on. Doesn't really surprise me when he's just as selfish as this, forcing somebody to take a 100-ton vault with them or he'll sue. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous. I guess this comes down to you have to leave the the property in the same way it was when you first got it. But I don't know how anyone would realistically know that, first of all, there was a huge 100-ton vault, and then secondly, that you had to get rid of it when you left, because when you moved in, it was there, right? But again, as was explained in this one, going back to the Second World War and having a contract carryover from there is extremely petty. I do kind of stand by what I said, though. I do think with all these things, you've got to read literally, I was going to say word for word, but almost letter for letter. Like the punctuation even is extremely important in these sort of contracts to make sure you're not getting absolutely shafted like this guy did. But yeah, if it wasn't for you, OP, I mean, that would have been terrible. But thank goodness that people like you exist and just exploited the guy that was exploiting this unlucky individual. And now for our final pro-revenge story of this episode, just a quick little one to finish. Steal furniture, almost lose your job. So my dad owns a house that he's been renting for some time now. The tenants that lived there were, for the most part, decent people who my dad thought were trustworthy. That all changed about 2 months into the tenancy when the tenant refused to pay the month's rent. My dad showed some leniency and gave them another month to pay up what was owed, but they didn't pay a thing. By this point, my dad, frustrated by the whole situation and being 2 months out of rent money, offered them a deal. Leave the house ASAP and then only pay half the money owed. They countered with a different agreement. They would leave the house in a clean state with all of their furniture left behind as compensation. My dad, wanting to just be done with them, agreed. Cut to when my dad gets to the house, finding the place in a mess with none of the furniture left behind, including the furniture that belonged to my dad in the first place. The 2 sofas that my dad owned were left behind, but they were trashed and left in the shed. When my dad confronted them, asking for them to pay up the full amount that the furniture was worth, he was met with a promise of payment after 2 weeks, which he didn't believe. And when he requested they pay earlier, he was met with "good luck getting your money," followed by laughing emojis. This made my dad angry, and he decided that he wasn't going to let this slide. My dad knew that the tenant was a Christian pastor of a church, and his son also had some job related to the church. My dad contacted the church and explained everything, from how they hadn't paid him rent money to stealing the furniture and trashing the place. The church was somewhat interested about this behavior. The next day, my dad gets an angry phone call from the tenant's son, cursing at him, asking him what he thought he was doing, contacting the church, saying he was being unfair. My dad hung up on him, only for him to attempt to ring 10 times afterwards. From what we could piece together, the church had told the pastor that if he didn't settle things with my dad, him and his son would lose their jobs. My dad received the full amount for the furniture that same day and agreed to back off. My dad later said it was never about the money, but the way this guy treated him and his values. My dad, being a Christian himself, was disappointed. There we go, a nice little one to finish on there. I do have to say that it's embarrassing that these healthy, Christian people who work for the church have this attitude. Does that not go exactly against what they're preaching? Surely it does. Like, how can they go to work each day? Like, you're a pastor, and you are going to work each day preaching, knowing that you're doing this at the same time. How can you live with yourself? I think it's kind of people like this sometimes that give not just the church, not just the Christian church, but just religion in general a bad name, when in reality it's just these horrible individuals doing things. But then you hear stories like this quite often, and you're just like, why? How can somebody be in this position and do something like this? But I guess it happens all over the world in every single sector. But yeah, normally, like, I thought that the church would usually pay for their residents, but I don't know. Maybe they weren't, or maybe they were, and these two were just, pocketing that and then just, using it for whatever they wanted. I will say though, shout out your dad, because he is a very, very good man. Phone calls for the previous owner, who turned out to be my trashy manager. Mobile phones became common in my country around 2004, just as I finished high school. My parents bought me my first phone, a second-hand Nokia. It was bulky and basic, but I promised myself that someday I'd buy a new phone with my own money. When college started, I had a 2-hour daily commute. In high school, I'd excelled academically and won several district-level awards. These awards were being distributed during my first year of college. One nationalized bank award finally gave me enough money for a new phone. I bought a Sony Ericsson K300i and a premium SIM card, not realizing it had been abandoned by its previous owner. If you guys remember Sony Ericssons, which by the way I believe was my first ever phone, Drop me a comment down below. By the third day, I started receiving calls for a guy named Bitsa from various financial institutions. It turned out the number previously belonged to him, and for 20 years, I've been getting these calls. Determined to keep my premium number, I began a routine of blocking wrong numbers. Back then, blocking was device specific, so each time I got a new phone, I had to start over, keeping a list of numbers to block. I got my first job after graduating in 2009. Around 2010, I was assigned to a new project with a notorious reputation for burning people out due to a nefarious project manager named Bits. I didn't know his full name for quite a while. He took pride in making our lives a living hell. Bits ruled with an iron fist. From the moment his team stepped into the office, they were met with a barrage of emails and messages, each more urgent than the last. Bits thrived on creating chaos, often changing project deadlines on a whim, demanding his team work late into the night and through weekends. Bits' presence loomed over every task. He insisted on micromanaging every detail, yet was quick to take credit for any successes, no matter how small. Failures, however, were met with his notorious tirades, publicly berating his team and assigning blame without hesitation. His unpredictable temper kept everyone on edge, afraid to make even the slightest mistake. Meetings were another tool in his arsenal of torment. He scheduled them during lunch breaks and after hours, ensuring no one could escape his grasp. These meetings were often pointless, serving only to reinforce his dominance and disrupt any semblance of work-life balance his team might have had. His relentless stream of emails continued around the clock, each carrying a thinly veiled threat, perfection or dismissal. Under his reign, morale plummeted and burnout soared, yet Bits remained oblivious, satisfied only by his complete and total control. I was quite ashamed when I learned that he was from the same area as I was and had gone to the same school, though years before me. In 2012, our company merged with a parent company. Almost nothing changed personnel-wise, but infrastructure-wise, we got MS Outlook and an organization view. That was when I first learned about Bits from an organizational hierarchy perspective. His full name was an eye-opener. It was Bitsa. Now, the name was common enough, but at the time, mobile numbers had an area-specific pattern, so I already knew that the previous owner of my number was from the same area as me. Still, it could be someone else. I wanted to dig deeper. I talked with an old mentor who lived in the same area and had coached several high school students for the last 2 decades. He confirmed my suspicions. I won't go into the details, but it was evident that Bitsa and Bits were the same person. I'd been quite angry with this unknown person named Bitsa for almost a decade by then, and Bits had been the bane of mine and several others' existence for quite some time. This is where the revenge lies. First, I unblocked all the numbers in my phone. I was getting 5 to 6 calls daily on average, but after unblocking about 150 numbers, it increased to 15 to 18. My answering strategy changed drastically. Instead of saying wrong number, I politely explained that the owner had changed his number and provided his current number to update their database. Now, this is where I could potentially be the jerk here. I also volunteered his manager's number in case he tries something else. The fallout was epic. These people had been trying to find him for almost a decade. Banks had sold his debts to companies that harass people for a living to get their money back. It turned out he'd been taking loans in everyone's names, his wife, parents, uncles, aunts, and giving everyone that same number. He was evading credit card debt and loans of upwards of $200,000. That is the equivalent in where OP is from, but they say it's an absolute trash load of money. Apparently, he had almost 20 cases filed against him, but nobody could find him. Probably why he thought he could walk on water. There are multiple versions of what happened at the office when his manager started to get calls about him. He was let go about 2 months later, and I haven't heard from him since. Well, apart from the fact that is obviously phenomenal revenge and a great ending to this story, the main question that I have is how was nobody able to find this guy for years and years and years? That's just insane. For example, if I'm a bank and I've lent a lot of money to an individual and they haven't even bothered to try and repay any of it, I am sending out a SWAT team. I'm sending out my best people. I'm employing the best company I possibly can to find him and make him pay that money back. Legally, of course, but you know what I mean. Why has nobody found this person before? Why has he been allowed to, as OP says, walk on water and just think that he's untouchable because so far he has been? I think that's a letdown in the system. Again, not entirely sure which country this takes place in, but that is the main thing that sticks out to me. Now, moving on to the revenge, from OP's point, phenomenal stuff. I mean, really, really good. I guess in many ways, it's fortunate after all these years that you were getting all these calls. I mean, it's so lucky that in a roundabout way, that SIM card belonged to the person it belonged to. It must have been very annoying for that period of time, but knowing then finally whose SIM it actually was, whose number it was, you must have just been like, oh my goodness me. I hit the jackpot the entire time and I never knew it. So yeah, great revenge from OP. But again, the main thing that sticks out to me is just the clear structural failure of whatever country this takes place in to not track this guy down. Now for our second story of revenge. And if you thought the first one was satisfying, well, this one is equally so and potentially even more. We reverse gazumped a greedy landlord and it was glorious. Quote, gazumping occurs when an agent or seller accepts an offer you make to buy a property at an agreed price, but the property is sold to someone else. This usually happens when the vendor sells the property for a higher amount. Okay, that is a definition of gazumping, and having not been in that position, I can imagine it is unbelievably frustrating. Comment down below, have you ever been gazumped? I don't think it's allowed, but goodness me, if it happens to you, it must be awful. This happened 15 years ago, and it is one of the proudest moments of my life. My best friend and her husband have 5 kids together. They lived in an expensive city and rented an old 4-bedroom house for $400 per week. The house was very run down with a disgusting kitchen and stinky drains, but it was all they could afford at the time. Still, they made it work. The owner was a nice old lady who was extremely wealthy and very fond of my friend. She froze the rent for 5 years and promised to let them buy the house once they'd saved enough to get a loan from the bank. As she'd helped other people in a similar way, they knew they could trust her. And so they saved every cent they could. It took them 5 years, but they finally told her they were ready. 2 days later, the nice old lady passed away before anything was put in writing. Enter the new owners, the lady's 4 children, each extremely wealthy in their own rights. They inherited a huge portfolio of properties. When they first spoke to my friends, they assured them that the sale would still go through, but they'd have to wait until probate had settled. Confident, my friends started making some changes to the place. They started by stripping wallpaper, painting, and making plans. Finally, probate was settled, and the owners agreed to go ahead with the sale for the previously agreed price. My friends applied for the loan, but to their shock, it was refused. The owners had raised the asking price by $80,000 without telling my friends. To make things even worse, the house would be put on the open market. In 7 days, there would be an open house, and with the market the way it was, it would probably sell immediately. My friends were devastated. They might be able to borrow enough, but it would take longer than a week to get. To make matters worse, property prices had soared recently, and rents had gone up a lot whilst theirs had been frozen. Not only were my friends going to struggle to get the money, if the place was sold to someone else and they were asked for a higher rent or were evicted, it would be nearly impossible to find another affordable place with more than 2 bedrooms. I was scared for my friends, but I was also incandescently angry. Those greedy sods were some of the wealthiest people in the city. They were screwing over a struggling family for less than $20,000 each. They didn't need the money. It's pure greed, and it was obvious that they'd always planned to do this. So, while my friends scrambled to come up with the money, I started plotting. I looked up advice on what helps to make a sale. We needed to make the place as undesirable as possible without making my friends look like bad tenants. First of all, it has to be uncluttered. So we moved all the furniture in from the walls, added some extra furniture and borrowed ornaments and hung a load of motorcycle memorabilia on the walls. The place felt much smaller. Secondly, the smell was very important. So my friend boiled a head of cabbage on the stove and we sprayed ammonia around the front and back doors because it smells like all the neighborhood cats have been marking their territory. We also poured 24 rotten eggs down the drain to make it smell like sewer gas. Thirdly, the neighborhood is obviously super important. So we obtained a moldy old couch and dumped it in the front yard of the neighbors across the road, with permission of course. Secondly, we also started calling friends for help. Anybody with a loud and trashy car was asked to do a few laps in front of the block during the open day. The street was unusually busy that day. Everyone we knew found a reason to drive by. It was practically rush hour. And thirdly, we called out mates from the rugby club, full contact football without any of that soft padding. A big portion of our club are very large men. The next door neighbour set up a barbecue in their front yard and we offered free food and cheap beer. They came on motorcycles wearing their roughest gear. There was quite a crowd. This is an amazing story. Can you just picture this in your minds, guys, right now? Just absolute carnage going on around these houses. Potential owners looking at the house being like, oh my goodness me, what have I just walked into? It actually reminds me of that scene from Fallout, if any of you guys have seen it, where the woman for the first time goes above land and just sees what has happened. And some of the creatures, they're huge, just the landscape is completely decimated. That's kind of what I'm picturing right now that this neighborhood has become. A lot of people showed up for the open day. Quite a few were in and out within minutes. One lady sat in her car and watched the party next door before driving away. The one bloke who stayed any length of time was brave enough to start up a conversation with somebody leaving the party. He asked if they were there often and was told every couple of weeks or so. They have an after party morning and the party the night before was 3 doors up. The partygoer also helpfully mentioned the troublesome drains that are always getting blocked by tree roots and stinking up the place. The potential buyer left without making an offer. So my friends were the only ones to make an offer. They still had to pay more than they'd planned, but not as much as the greedy idiots wanted. My friends signed the papers and paid the deposit that day. So when the brave buyer put in an offer of $30,000 more than my friends, there was nothing the owners could do about it. Strict anti-gazumping laws. I would have loved to see the owners' faces when they found out. Tell you what, I think I actually prefer that story to the first one, if that's even possible. But as I said, just the image that I had in my head there, just so good. A neighborhood just completely destroyed because people like your friends and were willing to do whatever they could to help them get the property they deserved at a good price. And obviously as well, it's good to see that there are anti-gazumping laws in whichever country this is. Wasn't 100% on that, but yeah, that is good to see. What's crazy is that somebody seeing this, you know, when they go to the open house and they see this, they were still willing to put in a bid. 30k over the original price that was offered by the old landlady to your friends, OP. Goodness me. Now, someone actually commented, where did this happen, out of curiosity? Any guesses down below before I reveal? Don't cheat. Pause the episode. Give me your thoughts. I'll give you some clues. Rugby club, football rugby club, barbecues, a lot of motorbikes, good people coming together to help out other people that are in need. That's right. If you said Australia, Sydney specifically, you were correct. Someone else also asked, just out of interest, how did you source rotten eggs so easily? And OP said, I wondered if someone would ask that. Well, 5 days before the open house, we cracked the eggs into a jar and left them in the sun. Needed a gas mask when we took the lid off. Phenomenal stuff. Comment down below. Which revenge did you prefer out of those two? Both great, both quite different. Corporate versus, I guess, sort of just like IRL, neighbors coming together, being great lads. I'm going to go with story 2. I made my Trump supporting roommate rethink his choices and position in life. Hi everyone. My name is Neil, and I'm here to tell you guys a story about me and my roommates. I voted Kamala and despise Donald Trump. My roommate, because he sucks, decided to vote for Trump, as he has in every election since he's been allowed to vote. To answer some questions and give some context, my roommate and I have known each other since we were children. I've grown up with the guy, so when he was dumped by his ex 6 months ago with no job, I gave him a place to stay immediately. I have a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment, which I pay for myself, and I had the master bedroom open. I like to give guests their own bathroom. He's lived here almost 6 months now, and has paid exactly $0 in rent or bills. I also give him free access to any and all weed I have, Medcard. He was originally supposed to start paying rent 2 months ago. I've let it slide though because he's working towards a job that he really wants. Now, my roomie has always been a bit of a cocky idiot. I still love him because he generally manages to be a decent dude despite being a Trumper, and after the election results, he was in rare form today. He'd been up late drinking and made a Facebook post saying, I'm dedicating today to making liberals mad, at like 4 AM last night. So, as I'm working today, paying the rent and bills in the apartment we both live in while he contributes nothing, I get on Facebook and I see this. So I comment, well, if that's the vibe, I think you should dedicate today to finding somewhere else to live. After all, no more handouts, right? After he wakes up, he proceeds to delete this and other haha Trump Facebook posts, withdraws his last remaining $25 for me, leaves it on the table, and I'm now at the bar with that money while he sits at home alone and bored with people asking him what I was talking about, including a girl he was talking to and he hadn't mentioned the reality of his living situation to. Beer has never tasted so good. Okay, now the Trump versus Kamala stuff is one thing. I don't want to get political, but yeah, it's probably pretty obvious if you watch my videos a lot that you'll know where I stand on that. However, I think that the problem here is not really who your roommate is supporting or supports in the election. It's more the fact that he's lived with you for 6 months and still doesn't have a job and still isn't contributing to your living arrangement at all. That is really concerning. Somebody actually said in the comments, which made me laugh, it sounds like you don't have a childhood friend or a roommate, but actually a pet, in the sense that this person is doing nothing for you at all. I mean, to be fair, at least a pet would provide you some sort of enjoyment, right? Or entertainment. But you're having to fund their life entirely and they're not doing anything. They're just living. It's crazy. Somebody else said maybe it's time to dial back on his supply of free weed. I mean, who doesn't get a job, like even a part-time one, a temporary one, while working towards their ideal job, in quotes, for 6 months? That is ridiculous. You can't just, go for that length of time, half a year saying, oh, I'm working towards a job that I really, really want, and then have nothing, have no income for 6 months. That's insane. Okay, now moving on to our second revenge story. Neighbor was stealing water from my supply, so I ruined him. I live in Asia, and I just purchased a new house. Now, the previous owners were family friends who needed cash urgently and haven't been living in my country for nearly 3 years, so I got it for a great price in the middle of the capital city. The sale was finalised at the start of this month, and I moved in right after. The house was definitely a fixer-upper, as the previous owners had left mid-renovation, and the main door was locked with just a padlock, not even a door lock. The house had no gates, meaning that anyone could just walk right on in. The first day I moved in, someone's bike was parked in the garage. I just parked it on the road, and on the same day I had a gate installed. An angry man was knocking on my gate later, and I didn't bother answering, but through my window I could see him giving up and taking the bike after 15 minutes. So already I wasn't digging the neighbourhood, but I didn't have any incidents after that, aside from people not knowing that this was no longer an abandoned house. So my gate was blocked more often than not, but a no parking sign on my gate fixed that issue. Last week, I was having a shower in my bathroom and I noticed my water pressure was lower than usual. I also heard my next door neighbour's water pump going. Now, this neighbour, an old guy, lived in a 3-storey house, the first being the lowest and the one he lived in. The other 2 floors were rented out to tenants. This guy wasn't happy about the house being sold and voiced many concerns to my friends, the previous owners. He was super angry about it, and my friends did warn me, but I'm a 6-foot guy with 3 dogs. No way he was doing anything. And yep, he didn't. So with this living situation, a water pump is needed to pump water to the tanks on the roof, since the public supply pressure is not enough to get it up 3 stories. Now, I heard the water pump going, and I immediately was suspicious. Sure, coincidences exist, but it wouldn't hurt to check it out. I waited till his pump turned off and then turned on different taps in the house. Sure enough, the pressure was back to normal. This made me even more suspicious. But if he was stealing water, it also made sense. The water bills had been going up over the years this house wasn't lived in, but the house also had some water leaks, so it was chalked up to that, even if the bills were too high to be caused just by leaks. Now it's starting to make sense. At some point in the last 3 years, this old miser thought he'd save the cost of paying for water and waltzed into the property and is siphoning water from my lines. I couldn't find where exactly he was siphoning water from, but after checking my pressure multiple times, I was pretty sure. So I sat on it for a few days, thinking if I should confront him, go the legal path, or just let it be. Now, water in my country is very cheap. My total bill, even with washing 3 animals, a car every week, and watering my garden, only cost like $5 a month, even with the neighbour also stealing some of it. I have to say, that's actually unbelievable. Wow. But it wasn't about how much I was paying or who was paying for it. It's about entitled old people who think that they're deserving of using other people's resources without paying for them and then getting away with it. It just didn't sit right with me, and I really wanted to teach him a lesson. That's a very good point. Who cares about the money if it's only $5? It's about the principle. What I did was really simple. I just turned off my water from the mains. I wouldn't have to break into his property, nor would I be breaking any laws. It was the best way of getting back at him without needing to even lift a finger. So, on Monday, just 4 days ago, I waited until the pump flicked on and I turned off the supply. Now, the way household tanks work in my country is that there's a ball valve in the tank which detects the level of water and turns on the pump. If the level doesn't increase, the valve stays open, which electronically sends a signal to the pump to stay on until the level gets to a point at which the valve closes and also shuts off the pump. However, the level wasn't increasing, and anyone knows that starving a pump of water isn't a good idea. This way, my expectation was that I'd burn out his pump and cause issues with his tenants. What I didn't account for is that his pump running constantly would mess up the fuses by constantly drawing power overnight and absolutely destroying his wiring. If he decided to upgrade his household wiring to a more modern standard, this would have been prevented, but this house clearly still had 90s era wiring. At around 3 AM, I heard all residents in the house waking up, talking in hushed voices about why does just their house in the neighborhood not have power or water. I found out about the power parts because the tenants devolved into shouting at their landlord. Our tenant protection laws are very important, and power and water are classed as essential even on a state level. Cutting those services is grounds for lawsuit, unless due to weather or some other unavoidable reason. In this case, the landlord is responsible for keeping the house wiring up to date and in good condition, alongside the supply of water. So the tenants were not happy, and one of them immediately moved out 2 days later when they were informed that water and power will not be returning the very same day this happened. Both tenants in the 2 floors lodged a complaint with the police, and if a person is in clear breach of laws, the police have the authority to fine or penalise the person without a court judgment. It can be challenged in court if the person thinks that they were unfairly penalised, but they still have to pay the fines and will only be refunded if and when the court finds the fines unlawful. So now, the landlord lost both tenants and has to pay a fine of $500, which is a lot of money in our country. He also has to refund the security deposits of both tenants and cannot rent out until both issues are fixed, which of course will cost him more money. As of right now, he's moving out on Sunday to his daughter's place since he cannot afford to live alone. The tenants were his only source of income, and he's a retired mechanic, so he has no other income. He did find out why the motor kept drawing power, overloaded the wiring, and burned out. He came by to my gates and asked me if I turned off my water, and I said, "Oh yeah, my tank had a new leak on a pipe, and I turned it off till the next day until the plumber came by to fix the issue." Guys, the look on his face. He kept a straight one, but I just knew he was holding back. He just said, "Oh, okay," and went back inside. I'm not sure if he knows that I know, but I don't care because he can't do anything. I'm getting a plumber down next week to correct my plumbing and remove any pipes that leave my property. So, I got rid of my water issue and a neighbour who could potentially be a pain in the butt by simply flicking a tap off. 2 birds, 1 stone, I'd say. Wow, I actually love this story. I actually can't think of any other revenge story that I've read, apart from stories where, you just let someone cook and they just do everything themselves. Like, someone's in the wrong and you're like, they're gonna keep doing things badly here. They're gonna dig themselves into an even bigger hole here. I'll just sit back, relax, and let them cause their own sort of downfall. But in a revenge story where someone's actually done something, I can't think of any other story where someone's had to do as little as this. I mean, literally just turning off their water supply, and has caused such a meltdown and such good and warranted revenge. Let me know, by the way, in the comments. You guys are better at remembering the stories I've read than I am, somehow. I don't know how you guys do it, but you remember pretty much every story. So yeah, if you've been around on the channel for a while, try and jog my memory. Give me a comment down below. Have I read another story like this where someone has done so little to cause so much despair, agony, and pure joy, to be honest, from my perspective. Now moving on to our 3rd story. This one comes from r/Traumatize them back. Oops, I think I broke him. Let me set the scene for you. I am a 31-year-old woman, and I'm visiting my boomer father from out of state. We're sitting around the dinner table with the rest of my family talking. My parents split when I was 13 or 14. They've both remarried, but my father absolutely cannot let it go, and he still trashes all over my mum to this day. Also, he recently developed this weird sense of accomplishment and brags that you have to raise kids to be insecure, because in his mind, the only way for someone to think of other people is to guilt them into it, so they learn to guilt themselves into it. Great logic, man. So he's actively boasting his successes in raising kids to be insecure, and I flatly say, except that it turned me into a doormat. I sought the approval of other people so badly that I just let anyone use me, especially as a teenager. My father sees this as an opportunity to trash my mum and says, yeah, your brother told me you used to sneak boys over to your mum's at night. That would have never happened if I'd gotten sole custody of you instead of your mum. My response? Actually, it probably would have happened a lot more. In fact, the very first time it happened was here. Let me tell you, the shock on his face was freaking priceless. He was almost too dumbfounded to ask, what? I tell him, yeah, I used to take my window screen out and have them climb through the bedroom window. His jaw on the table, I delivered the final blow. Oh, and by the way, I was 15 the first time. He was 20, so a man, not a boy. That tends to happen when you're so insecure that you'll do anything for approval. And that's when his brain broke. I have never seen him back away from a conversation so quickly. He had no clue how to respond to that. So he just changed the topic, which honestly stood out way more than if he'd actually responded to what I said. Yet that somehow is the worst part of all of this. Him not addressing the fact that you just admitted to him that you were assaulted in his house at the age of 15. Wow, this is maybe one of the worst fathers I've ever heard of. If you were to ask him about that conversation now, OP continues, I'm 100% certain he's wiped it from his memory. His small mind cannot fathom it, so I'm not surprised when he acts like it never happened. He still brags about raising kids to be insecure, but honestly, having that lasting image of the shock on his face, that is all I need. I mean, yeah, as I said during that, like, what's happening to me right here, guys. I imagine is sort of what happened to your dad, OP, in that moment, where he just had no idea what to even begin to even think or say. So he cowardly just changed the topic and didn't even address it. I mean, what a terrible human being. It's meant to be your father. I mean, anyone that hears about someone being assaulted and then just says, okay, moving on anyway, what are you doing this weekend? It's just a terrible person. Sorry. Wow. What's crazy as well is that even after that, he still continued on about, you know, like raising your kids to be insecure as like a good thing. Like you're saying at the end there, he still brags about it. How can you brag about that when you've now learned from your daughter what happened? It makes no sense, but at least you made him think, I suppose. I mean, this is a sort of person that is never ever gonna understand really, like, you know, right from wrong. I don't think. I mean, their morals are clearly all over the place, but hopefully you've made him at least stop and think for 1 second that what he does or how he lives his life or how he parents is just obviously plain wrong. Okay, moving on to our next story. Going to invite unwanted guests to our wedding after we already said no? Watch this. This was a few years back, but it's still a goodie. I wasn't on speaking terms with one of my brothers, and for good reason. He tried to start a fist fight with my now husband, and his wife threatened to shoot me. Wow. At the time, we were enraged, and I made it clear to both my brother and the rest of the family he wasn't invited to the wedding. However, my mother took it upon herself to reach out and say she talked to him and he and his wife promised to behave. I reminded her he was absolutely not invited. She had no right to do that, and she needed to call him back and make that known. Her response? But he's your brother, and to think of the family. To make matters worse, we were receiving a lot of pressure to pay for an open bar, and we don't even drink ourselves, as well as pay for a bigger venue, even though we wanted a small and more intimate wedding. Where was this pressure coming from? Why, none other than my alcoholic mother, who wanted to invite a bunch of relatives I've never met and take advantage of an open bar. Now, here comes the fun part. I was at my wit's end with all this family drama. So, one Monday evening, a couple of months before the wedding, the following conversation took place. I said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" He replied, "Hanging out with you." "Why? Want to get married?" I asked. "Are you serious?" "Heck yeah," he replied. And we did. We eloped with just us and a couple of friends that offered to officiate the wedding that Tuesday evening. We saved thousands upon thousands of dollars, didn't have to deal with all the drama, and had our small and intimate wedding that we wanted. Honestly, I wish we'd done this to begin with. However, as you can imagine, my mother lost her mind. She posted all over Facebook, seeking pity about not being at her daughter's wedding, and how could I do that to her, etc, etc. Funny how she didn't mention any of the above details in her post, and made it all about her once and woe is me. Even more funny is we would have had the wedding if she'd have just respected our decisions. So no, you don't get to invite unwanted guests, make demands, or get to go to our wedding. Wow, there we go. Yeah, someone commented, dodging bullets like Neo in the Matrix, and I could not agree more. Like, just absolutely ridiculous. Your mother is trying to get her child to pay for an open bar at her wedding just so she can invite all her pals along and they just get smashed. Really? Is that what you want to do at your daughter's wedding? Just get battered and like not remember any of it? What a sad life. Somebody said in the comments, yet another parent who thinks that your wedding is their wedding. You definitely did the right thing. And yeah, that's the thing. She wants to have her day on your day and you pay for it all. Ridiculous. And who cares? Who cares if she's upset? She's kind of shown her true colors. I mean, she already had, but the fact that she's posting all about this on Facebook, trying to get sympathy from people rather than just having a conversation with you. I suppose if she was the sort of person that would have a conversation with you about this, then she'd probably be a better person and this wouldn't have happened in the first place. But yeah, I mean, the Facebook stuff just shows she's just a whiny, horrible woman, I imagine. Yeah, just not really a mother at all. Maybe I'm going too far there. That's just what I think. Somebody else said in the comments, which I love, that conversation with your husband, which was just 4 sentences. I mean, how many words was that in that sentence? That's 5, 10, 14, 19 words were uttered in that one sentence. And after 19 words, you decided to get married. Legendary scenes. And this person says that might go down as a lifetime achievement award, having that conversation with your husband. Amazing. And now, last but not least, the 5th revenge story of this episode. If you're going to steal the catalytics off my truck, you should have checked if they were actually functional first. It was a fun morning at the beginning of last week, starting up my truck and waking everyone up at 2:45 AM to learn that someone swiped the hollowed out cats. The idiots missed the neighbor's cameras that basically gave away who they were. It's 2 kids from the area who drive around in a pretty busted up police Crown Vic. I chose not to call the cops. Instead, I called one of my friends, who's code enforcement, and I let him know what my plan was, and he relayed the info to the police that I was finally going to do a nuisance tow on that same Crown Victoria. The car they drive isn't street legal, as it has no license plates or insurance or working taillights, and rattles like trash due to the horrible sound system. They also spend their whole day at a chicken shack smoking. Not sure who they're getting money from, but I'm guessing that stealing catalytics was part of the equation. When I spotted the car sitting on a quiet street, I called it in and got the go-ahead to tow. I took it straight to the police station, and they tried to run an owner check with the VIN number, only to find out that it hadn't been registered since 2011, and the owner was someone other than the kids who sold them the car with no title because of all the back registration owed. The cop said we can go ahead and take it to the junkyard till they can get a black title, aka certificate of destruction. By then, the 2 idiots were running all around town looking for their car, thinking it had been stolen by one of their friends as a prank. The key lock was so worn out you could start it with any car key. They found it at the junkyard and tried to steal it by one of them distracting the owner and the other stealing the car back, but the junkyard was aware of who they were, so they cut the drive shaft off beforehand. I missed out on this part, but they actually got arrested for trying to steal their car back, and they watched as the junkyard used a crane to rip the car to shreds. When I saw it, the remains looked like a toddler just ripped it to the bare frame out of curiosity. They've been out of jail since, but haven't left their trailer. I did a drive-by earlier, and I noticed a Beta Jeep Liberty in the driveway, also with no plates, and I'm already working with the cops on taking that too, if I see it out in public. Except this time, I won't miss the show. Well, there we go. Rounding things off with just a couple of absolute idiots. The crazy thing is they don't even learn after their first car gets, towed and destroyed. They're like, oh, I don't care, let's just do it again, like, just live a sad life again. Like, this is the thing with a lot of these sort of, I suppose, characters or people in these stories. Just complete losers. Like, if anything, I kind of feel bad for some of them, that their lives are just so bad and they just do stuff like this. Like, surely there's more to life than doing this. I don't know. It's also like one of the most trashy forms of theft. Like, who's going around just nicking catalytic converters? Is that actually a thing that people do? Such a weird thing to do. Is there money to be made there? I mean, I assume there is, otherwise they wouldn't do it. But yeah, car thieves, man, just terrible, terrible people. Actually, I mean, we've had, on my road, we've had quite a few cars stolen over the years. It's just crazy. We actually had our number plate stolen from one of our cars about a month or so ago. And you know, I'm going to be honest, it's not my house, my family's house, but we live in a very nice area. Just mental that people do that sort of stuff. Cheat on your wife with mine, I will burn your life to the ground. Way back in the early 2000s, I began to suspect that my wife was up to something. Our two kids were about 4 and 6. Still young, but not so young they couldn't tell you something about what had happened in their day. They started talking a lot about staying with my wife's parents during the day, which wasn't really that strange in and of itself. But since they lived about 90 minutes away, doing so 2 or 3 times a week seemed a bit much. That was basically every day she wasn't working at her part-time job. When I asked her about it, she denied it, but she was never a good liar. So I started tracking the mileage on her car, and sure enough, she was driving an extra 400 or so miles per week. I knew something was going on. Then, one day I sat down at the computer and she had left a sticky note with her AOL password written on it next to the keyboard. I couldn't resist, and I logged in to read her emails, and I saw a few email exchanges between her and her college BFF where they discussed how my wife was regularly effing one of her ex-boyfriends from school. No mention of details about him other than my wife also talking trash about his wife, making fun of how she'd gotten fat after having kids. Anyway, I printed out these email exchanges and I stashed them. I still needed to know the details, so I called a friend who was a cop, and he suggested I call a guy he knew that had left the force to become a PI. Ron was great. I paid his retainer and gave him the emails and what little I knew about my wife's activities, and he figured out exactly what she was doing. His report detailed with photos and times, dates, and locations, all about how she would take the kids to her parents, then go and meet this guy for lunch. Then they'd go to a dumpy motel for a few hours, after which she'd pick up the kids and return home. At this point, I hired a divorce lawyer. My parents cheated on each other, and the fallout absolutely effed mine and my siblings' childhood. It was something that was totally unacceptable. I also asked Ron to find out what he could about this guy. Ron absolutely came through. I learned his name, let's call him Bob, that he was married and had 3 kids. I also found out that he worked as a VP of sales for his father-in-law's business. At this point, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I also asked Ron for a couple more copies of his report, and one more thing that I wanted him to do for me. On the same day I had my wife served with the divorce papers at her work, I had Ron meet with this guy's wife and show her everything he'd found out. She seemed nice, and I figured that she deserved to know what her dear hubby was up to. What she did with that information, well, that's up to her. While the information about my wife's infidelity didn't really matter in my divorce proceedings, Bob's wife did a real number on him. According to the publicly available court documents from the divorce and other related proceedings, she cleaned out their joint account, took the kids, and left. As soon as her dad found out what he'd done, Bob was fired, and since her parents actually owned the house where Bob and his wife lived, he also got evicted. Their divorce was ugly. Lots of fighting, in and evidently out of court. I guess Bob went to the house and started arguing with his wife, and it escalated to the point that her brother stepped in and Bob got his nose broken. There were restraining orders, a few more incidents with police reports, criminal charges, jail time, and so on. I can't find Bob on the internet anywhere these days. Last I heard, he'd left the state and his ex-wife did okay. She went to work at her dad's company and took over after he retired. As for me, my ex and I get along well enough. I didn't engage with her on anything that wasn't related to the kids, and now that they're both adults, I don't talk to her at all anymore. I don't hate her or anything, but I only care in the context that she is my kids' mum and is important to them. Nothing beyond that. Well, good. She is getting what they deserve. It's a phenomenal start to this episode. Simple story, but it's great that there was justice served to the people who deserved it. I've got to say, OP, like, seriously, fair play. I say this quite a lot when I comment on these stories, but I don't know how people just keep so cool in these situations, and you know, they use logic, and I feel like I'd be driven by such anger and hatred and just like shame of what had happened to me and the fact that my partner had cheated on me. But yeah, you just went through pretty methodically, step by step, and checked off all the boxes and got it done. In the process, destroying Bob's life. Phenomenal scenes, and again, it's exactly what he deserved. Now for our next story of revenge. My landlord thought he could pull one over on me, but ended up learning the meaning of, you should have read the fine print before you signed it. For some context, I live in Germany, which has extremely strong tenants' rights. I've been living in my apartment for about 8 years now. About 1 year after I first moved in, I got a letter from the company that owns my apartment building. In short, it said this: Dear OP, we are cancelling your existing rental contract. If you wish to continue renting this apartment, please sign this new contract with higher rent or move out within 30 days. This scared the heck out of me. I was living in a city where the rent prices were skyrocketing and I'd only just managed to find a long-term apartment that I could afford. As soon as I began looking at my options, it became clear that I was either going to have to fight what was essentially an eviction or move back to the US and start building my life again just after I'd finally found some stability. After I asked around a bit, somebody tipped me off to something called a amithejerk. I know I'm not pronouncing that right, but I'll go with it one more time. amithejerk, something like that, which is essentially a non-profit group that advocates for tenants' rights and gives its members the opportunity to get legal advice regarding their rights as tenants. I looked up one near me and booked it over to their office. I explained my situation, I filled out some paperwork, and I went to speak with the group's lawyer. I showed her the letter and my current contract, and she looked over it for a few minutes without saying a word. After what felt like an eternity, she looked at me and said in her most diplomatic German legalese, "You have nothing to worry about. This letter is BS." Now, admittedly, yeah, that's paraphrased, but that's what it boiled down to. She then turned to a page of the contract and pointed out a single line in it. No changes may be made to this contract unless both parties consent to the proposed changes. In other words, as long as I refuse to sign, they can't do anything to me. The group's lawyer then sent a letter on my behalf to the company. I received a copy of it for my records, and essentially it told the company that they would find themselves in some major trouble with the government if they continued to pursue the matter further. About a month went by, and I heard nothing more. Then, one day, a letter from the company arrived. The company basically admitted defeat and tried to cover its tail by saying that the letter was sent in error by, quote, an employee who is no longer with the company. Okay, super believable. For the next 7 years, it became an annual ritual. Company sends ominous letter telling me I'm getting kicked out. I then forward the letter to the amithejerk, and the amithejerk's lawyer sends them a letter telling them to stick the letter where the sun don't shine. And then, after attempt number 8, the lawyer sent them another letter telling them to cut the trash and stop sending these letters every year. I haven't heard from them since. It's just so obvious, isn't it, that they're doing this to all their tenants, trying to force them out, trying to scare them. In reality, they know that legally this is never gonna work unless the tenant who they're trying to force out and terrify signs, which I imagine sadly a lot of them do, not knowing what OP knows. But yeah, it's just very sad. I think the thing to do now, though, is to make sure that all your neighbors know about this. As I said, it's obvious that this company and probably other companies in the country as well and across the world are just preying on susceptible and vulnerable people who know no better. And I wouldn't know any better as well. I mean, if I got something like this and I didn't, if I was new to the country especially, I would have no idea. So I think that the thing now is just awareness, making sure that other people don't get ripped off like you almost did. I mean, you say you asked around a bit and someone tipped you off to something called the amithejerk. I mean, thank God that exists as well, by the way, because if it's non-profit and doesn't need, like, I don't know if you said it was for free or not, but anyway, it's non-profit, right? Maybe it's a charitable sort of thing, but it's doing the God's work, is what I'm saying. And the more people that know about it, the better. Because, yeah, I mean, landlords and companies that own buildings and then rent them out get a bad rep anyway. This is despicable. No proof? Oh, bless your heart, boss. I wouldn't be surprised if some of you are going to think this is fake, but I feel like other disabled people will find this a little satisfying, especially with how human resources officers across the board have sunk to new levels of gaslighting. I have a genetic condition that gives me a variety of weird disorders, including a severe walnut allergy and cancer during my late teens. Since I'm in my 20s, many people assume that I'm not as disabled as I actually am, but 90% of the time I just shrug it off. I've experienced a lot of subtle disability discrimination at work, but I've never been at a company where they're comfortable flat out saying, we don't hire disabled people. Like, personally, I understand the logic of accidentally discriminating against me because you worried your company could give me an allergic reaction, but every disabled person is unqualified? That eventually led me to this conversation. Head of HR and owner of major company saying, I understand you had a misunderstanding with your manager yesterday. I wanted to apologize for any mix-up. No, there was no misunderstanding, I replied. My manager denied me a reasonable accommodation because you don't do them and said your company doesn't hire anyone with a gap in their resume due to disability or illness. Personally, I don't see how chemotherapy I had years ago affects my qualifications for working as a store cashier. The owner replied, those are serious accusations, which we will certainly look into. Unfortunately, none of our employee calls are recorded, so there's nothing I can really do about a he said, she said situation. I cut him off. Oh, it's not. You're welcome to treat it as a he said, she said situation if that's your decision. However, I do have the conversation captured for my own records. I'm sorry. Let me understand. You recorded your conversations with our employees? Well, this state is single party consent. I wish I could have seen his face when I clicked play on my computer and he heard my manager say that the company was going to throw out my resume only because I needed chemotherapy a while ago, since the owner was, quote, particular. The silence on the owner's end when he realized that his trashy policies were caught on a hot mic was priceless. I would add more details to show just how bad the situation got before and after reaching out to HR, but to be honest, the EEOC is about to traumatize them harder than I ever could. But this one is just insane. I mean, the previous two stories were pretty bad. This one just saying, nah, you had chemo, and because there's a gap in your resume, we can't hire you, is actually unbelievably, like, I don't even know the word to use. I suppose it's ableist, but it's also just like so disgustingly sad. It's just people that have a heart wouldn't include this in their contracts. And also, like, why does it even matter? Is it not? I would argue it's probably a positive thing that someone has managed to go through chemotherapy, come out the other side, and still is doing, you know, successful enough in life to come to you and be in a good spot to work for your company. Isn't that just an amazing thing? Rather than, oh, actually, no, you have a history of cancer, therefore there's a chance you might get it again, so we're not going to employ you. What's the logic there? I have no idea. Now for our final story of this one. I think I broke my brother-in-law. I made this Reddit account months ago, and today I'm deciding to use it instead of having this post linked to my main. I still feel all kinds of icky about it, and I feel I'd be identifiable if people I know see it. Fair warning, I hate the effort. So here goes. My sister has been married to her husband for many, many years. Her daughter, his step, is severely disabled, physically and mentally, and needs 24/7 care. They part built a house to suit her needs. It needed much work and extending, so it's very much their forever house because it had to be. However, the house costs a lot of money, and neither my sister nor my brother-in-law can afford it on their own, which is why my sister hasn't just upped and left him. She'd have nowhere suitable to move my niece to without a lot of work and money, which she doesn't now have. And my niece's comfort is everything to her. My sister works full-time and provides care when she's not working, so as you can imagine, she's got a lot on her plate. A good few years ago, back before Brexit, which is when the UK voted to remove us from the European Union, don't remind me, my brother-in-law would bang on and on and on about immigrants taking our jobs and all sorts of other racist stuff. Funnily enough, he only brought out those little gems when I was over there, and that was because I am staunchly anti-racism. As an example, I'm a small woman and I'd be fronting up to big men in the local pub and making them back down by sheer force of will and the judicious pointing of a wine glass. My brother-in-law knew this, so he thought it would be funny to try and push my buttons whenever I was over at their house. At the worst of it, I had to be over there because of illnesses, both my sister and niece, and I couldn't just walk out, so I just gave him the stonewall face I reserved for utter idiots. He'd be grinning at me and getting a blank expression back, and he didn't like that, so he'd stomp off whining about how everyone's so sensitive and can't take a joke. The more I had to be over there, the more I got to hear about their plans for retiring abroad, a nice little something somewhere in sunny Spain, and they'd have long conversations, waxing lyrical and dreaming about this. And then brother-in-law dropped a bombshell that really upset my sister. He doesn't have a private pension to pull from when he retires, only the state pension. Oh no, I say. Does that mean you'll have to get a job over there? My brother-in-law replied, yeah, I will. So let me get this straight. You'll be an immigrant taking someone's job then, right? His face was a picture. I'm not even kidding. His eyes went completely blank and his face just dropped and went grey. He stood up and walked out into the back garden, and he never spoke another word to me for the rest of the month I was there. Sadly, I can't say it shut him up for good, but it did stop him from talking about immigrants in my presence. Okay, and this guy is just an absolute loser. You're going over to take care of ill people, and he's trying to make racist jokes because he knows you're anti-racist. That's good, isn't it? That's just the sort of person you want to be hanging around. I think the less I say about that guy, the better. Nurse said I was squeamish because I hadn't had children yet. I traumatized her by telling her about the illegal medical testing I endured as a child. This happened a couple of weeks ago. My fertility doctor ordered some blood tests for me. I am a 34-year-old woman, and I went to my local healthcare clinic to get them done. I have trypanophobia, a fear of needles, which I disclosed to the nurse who'd be taking my blood. I always need to warn them because I can handle myself okay for around 10 minutes or so, but if the blood draw takes too long, I'm likely to vomit and/or faint. I once very embarrassingly threw up on the nurse's shoes. The nurse looks at me like they don't believe me and asks if I have children. I say no. Keep in mind that the labels for my blood tests have the word infertility in big bold letters, but whatever. The nurse goes on about how I won't be this squeamish once I have kids. I'm pretty annoyed at this point, as I can already feel a bit woozy. So I say very coldly, I didn't used to be squeamish about needles as a kid, which is why the doctors in my home country volunteered me for medical testing and training. My parents got paid while I was used as a human pincushion for medical trainees. I specifically remember the day they taught students how to draw blood from my neck. The nurse turned white and proceeded to wordlessly draw the blood. Because they took so long, I ended up throwing up, which they had to clean up. Maybe next time they'll learn to listen to their patients. Wow, what a start to this subreddit. I mean, this nurse is going on about you having children when your chart has literally specified that you're infertile. Absolutely insane. I mean, to be fair, I'm appalled that they're judging you in any way at all. You're a nurse. Surely you shouldn't judge someone's health issues. That's ridiculous. But great revenge, and I hope that cleanup took a long time because they deserved it. So there we go. If you didn't already know, that is r/traumatize them back, but I've got a lot more posts to come in this one. Let's get into the second. Karen said, boys will be boys. So I return the favor. More than 20 years ago, when me and my sisters were still in elementary, our mum took us to a shopping mall for clothes and groceries. A major supermarket was attached to the mall. After everything was over, we stopped by the bookstore where us kids picked whatever books we wanted while she was picking educational books for both of us. The bookstore was also selling some physical discs for various softwares, including games. While both of us were looking into the games we wanted, a little boy of our age came next to us, opened up one of the discs, and poked my sister in the eye. My sister immediately started to cry her eyes out, and my mum rushed over to see what was happening. She scolded the little boy after hearing what happened, to which he got upset and went to grab his Karen of a mother. Karen comes over and demands to know who yelled at her son. The two ladies began to get into a shouting match. My mum argued the kids had no reason to hurt my sister like that and should be taught better. But Karen argued, boys will be boys, and that he doesn't know any better. She asked my mum, why are you overreacting? I decided enough was enough. I did a frontal kick on the kid as hard as I can, making him fall on his butt. I saw there was a nice footprint imprinted on his shirt. He began to let out the most annoying cry I've ever heard. The Karen quickly rushed over to her little turd and began shouting at me. I looked her in the eye and said, boys will be boys. Why are you overreacting? She tried to argue more, but her friend, or maybe her sister, held her back and ushered her out of the store. We went to get burgers and fries afterwards, but my mum also lectured me about how violence isn't the answer. Me being a little sprouty elementary kid didn't care and rode that hype train for weeks. You know what? I actually disagree with your mum. Sometimes I feel like violence has to be the answer, otherwise people don't learn lessons. right? And take that with a lot of context, and the vast majority of the time, it's not the right thing to do. But I feel like once in a blue moon, sometimes it has to be done. Otherwise, no one's ever going to learn. Like, there are very, very few cases, very, very few, where violence should be the first response. Very, very few. But in a situation like this, where this woman is so oblivious to how heinous her children are being, spouting terrible excuses like boys will be boys. And yeah, I can imagine that this thing will continue to happen again and again because her kids aren't being parented correctly. They're not learning what's right and wrong. Perhaps this flying kick, which, let's be honest, probably didn't hurt that much, will actually sort her kids out and will stop them from doing stuff like this in the future. Like, it's educational. If a flying kick could ever be educational, this is it. I didn't look pretty enough 4 hours after my mum died. This happened a really long time ago now, but I've never seen anyone run away from a situation quite so quickly, and sometimes I do wonder what the guy thought, or if he learned his lesson. So my mum had been terminal and was in hospice care in our home. We knew time was limited. However, when I'm upset, the first thing to go to hell is my sleep schedule. I slept 2 hours that night, and I hadn't been getting much more sleep than that for the few weeks preceding this. But she ended up passing slightly before 4 the morning that this took place. So, after she passed, I decided I needed caffeine to get through the day. So when the nearest gas station opened up at 8 AM, I headed over there for some energy drinks. I likely did look a bit of a mess. It is easy to tell when I'm tired, and I was wearing college merch that was much bigger than my usual size. I get out of my car and start shuffling through my clothes. I couldn't remember which gigantic pocket I'd put my wallet in. While I did that, this man pulls up to a pump in a very shiny car. I don't remember what he looked like, beyond that he looked a bit like a very put together game show host. This man turns to me. He was 20 feet away, so this was all said loudly, and says, "It's a shame someone so pretty can't improve everyone's day with a smile." I burst out crying, ugly crying, with the sobbing mouth thing and shaking. I just went from standing there hoping I hadn't left my wallet at home to bawling in a mostly empty parking lot. I did manage to yell something like, "I'm sorry I'm not freaking pretty enough for you when my mum died 4 hours ago." The dude turned on his heels and left. Didn't pump gas, didn't go inside for coffee, didn't apologize, just got in his car and left. I was saved from standing in the parking lot sobbing by a woman who I think was jogging and heard what the man and I said to each other, and the employee of the gas station, who were both very kind. Ah, man, there we go. I mean, look, that is obviously the deepest story that we've had so far. Goodness me, I just gotta say off the bat, OP, I'm so sorry to hear about your situation and your parents passing, but also just to be in this spot and have someone do this to you. Yeah, absolutely insane. Like, to be fair to the guy, maybe he had good intentions, but you really shouldn't be doing this sort of thing. You shouldn't be putting your nose in someone else's business, especially when they have the expression that I'm sure you had, which was just, you know, being absolutely distraught. It's past the point of not smiling. Surely you look just very, very upset. I mean, from an outlooker looking in, surely you knew that something had gone wrong there. You weren't just being sad or like not smiling. I don't know. I get the feeling he came in with like a positive attitude, but ultimately, yeah, terrible thing to do. Don't assume things about other people. And I hope that this guy learned his lesson. Although I say that, a good man would have just apologized and said, "I'm so sorry. I really had good intentions. I just want people to be positive. It's my bad. I'm so sorry for your loss and that I did that. That's my fault." But actually, no, he ran away, didn't he? He ran away like a little coward. So I take it all back. He's just a disgraceful man. There we go. I will say, though, that the people that helped you in that situation, that has restored my faith in humanity. But once again, OP, I'm so sorry. Let's move on. I was getting tampons, officer. So I got pulled over one night coming back from Walmart. I definitely deserved the ticket for speeding, but the cop was asking for too much information. It was late, I was cramping, I just wanted to be home so I could stop bleeding in my pants and eat my cookies. Of course, the typical question, "Do you know how fast you were going?" "Yes, sir, 65. Where are you coming from?" Okay, fair question, I guess. It is 12 AM. "Walmart, officer." "What were you getting at Walmart?" Okay, why do you need to know that?" "I just want to get home, my guy. But since you asked, I was getting tampons. Do you want to see them?" His eyes got wide and he walked away without saying a word. He came back to give me my ticket and he couldn't make eye contact. Most expensive box of tampons I've ever bought. However, the look on that guy's face was priceless. Now, I agree with you, OP. There's questions that as a police officer, you are obviously allowed to ask and expected to ask. The one about, do you know how fast you're going? That's a standard question, and I think that is a reasonable one. But asking what you were buying at a shop surely is just not relevant information. Like, at all. Why would an officer ever need to know that? To be honest, I think he should have just not given you the ticket there. Just through embarrassment. Just held his hands up and said, wow, I've been completely done there. I'm not going to ticket you. There you go. Enjoy your day. But no, he still gave you a ticket. What a little rat. Yeah, I get it's the law, but come on. You effed up there. You deserve some form of karma, surely. My kid can die if I don't. I was waiting to check in at the dentist today, and some old lady started humping and such. We're in Florida, and I'm wearing a mask. Unusual, I guess, but most people just mind their own business and leave me alone. There's a few, however, who are pains about it. She looked at me and asked why I was wearing that thing on my face. Everyone knows that the virus is gone. Why am I out and about if I'm that scared? Now, I have breast cancer, and I'm not feeling great today. Mine's not terrible, considering. My son, though, also has cancer, and his is bad. Grade 4 brain cancer. Oh my goodness me, OP, I'm so sorry to hear that. I just looked at her and said, my oncologist says cancer patients need to be careful about dental care. Plus, my kid can die if I don't. She turned sheet white and left me alone the rest of the time we were in the waiting room together. I'm pretty sure the dental hygienist who came out to get me was purposely a bit louder than normal, asking about how my son was doing. Now, this is pretty similar, I think, to the third post we had in this episode. Once again, why are you sticking your nose in someone else's business when you just don't need to be doing it? And also, what is wrong with wearing a mask? If I see someone wearing a mask out and about these days, I say fair play to them, thank you. Either you are ill and you're protecting the rest of the population from getting your illness, or you don't want to get ill yourself. Both great things. Why is that a negative thing? Oh, COVID is done now? Well, first of all, it isn't. Like, my granny had COVID a couple of weeks ago, and the only reason she didn't have it that badly is because she's still getting vaccinated. And secondly, who cares? Let people wear masks. My wife is dead. When my son was born, I was a stay-at-home dad for the first year of his life. We also lived in New York City, and I loved taking him out into the city to do things. Nearly every subway ride, though, I'd have some kind of encounter with a woman or group of women, usually boomers, who would say some variation of giving mum the day off, or so nice to see dad's babysitting once in a while. Now, first off, it's not possible to babysit your own kid. That's called parenting. But second, I was the primary caregiver. Mum was at work, I stayed home with the boy. It got old real fast. But I found a very nice trick that shut these old biddies down real quick. Anytime someone would ask if I was babysitting or giving mum the day off, my face would fall. I'd get real quiet, and after taking a moment to compose myself, I'd say something like, my wife died during childbirth, or my wife is currently undergoing radiation treatment for stage 4 cancer. She's at a clinic in California. I haven't seen her in 6 months. Or my favorite, his mum abandoned us when he was just 6 weeks old. She'd been using drugs pretty heavily while she was pregnant, and so he was born addicted. I didn't hear from his mother for months after she left, until one day I found out she'd overdosed and died. This little guy is all I've got left of her. But we carry on best we can. That shuts them up real quick. Now, I will say that perhaps given the stories we've read earlier in this episode, this might not be like the best thing to do. I think like lying about people dying in your family is maybe a little bit too much, but I completely understand why you did it, OP, and it did have the desired effect. And again, like, you don't have to deal, or you shouldn't have to deal with this complete and utter sexism every single day when you're just being a good dad. So if that's the best way that you thought about, you know, dealing with people like this, then I hold my hands up. There you go. I mean, if it does happen every single day, then that must get unbelievably annoying. I mean, I will say that saying that his mum abandoned us when he was just 6 weeks old, she'd been using drugs pretty heavily, and so he was born addicted. I mean, imagine hearing that. Like, you've just said, oh, it's so nice to see a man doing the job for once, babysitting, and then you hear the guy say that. You got to be questioning your life at that point. Yeah, it's had the desired effect. Comment on my butt at work. Let me make this uncomfortable for us both. I was working as a front-end cashier for a local grocery store. It was around the time of my lunch break, so my line was closed off after this last customer. Grizzled, 60, 70-year-old bearded guy. I am in my early 20s, a feminine cashier. As I finish ringing up his purchases and he goes to slide his card, the card machine doesn't work. I tell him to keep swiping until it beeps. We were mid-change to a new sales system, so this was a common occurrence. I bend under my till to clean and organize while he's sliding his card. As I'm bent over, his card dings. Sweet, let's wrap this up so I can go eat. Instead, oh, I liked it when you did that. I'm still under the till. I roll my eyes. And then inspiration strikes. Petty inspiration. I come up. Did what, sir? When you bent over, it worked. I had a confused face. Why? Well, it liked when you bent over. Why would it like that I bent over? It's a boy card. Boys like it when girls bend over. Sorry, I've got to say, this is the creepiest dude I've ever seen on Reddit. What? But why? I ask again. Well, they just do. At this point, I'm gleeful on the inside. But why? I don't understand. The old man is getting flustered. His face gets red. He mumbles, Mom, you're making me a little uncomfortable. I drop the dumb act. I lean forward across the check stand and look right into his eyes. And how do you think I feel when a man makes an unwanted comment on my backside while I'm at work? He is 20 shades of red, stammering. I meant no disrespect. It was supposed to be a compliment. I put on a very stern face. Well, it was disrespectful. Please don't comment on women's bodies when they work. I'm so sorry. It won't happen again. He collects his bag and leaves without another word. Gleeful vindication. Good. Now maybe you won't go and harass other people at their frickin' jobs. Well, yeah, creepiest guy ever. Literally the creepiest guy ever. Well done, OP, for not just being quiet. I mean, it must be pretty, horribly uncomfortable in situations like this. And you just want to stay quiet and just say, okay, fine, I'll ring you up, go, leave the store. But no, you did the right thing. I mean, fair play. It's very brave to do that, courageous. I can't even imagine being in this situation. Just try and do your job and getting harassed by people 50 years older than you. I mean, by the way, brother, you got no chance anyway. What are you doing? Go home to your old people's home and just sit in your chair and do the Sudoku, my friend. And by the way, I quite like Sudokus. So that's not a slight on people that do Sudokus, but it is a slight on creeps. I served my sister-in-law a child's plate after she broke multiple heirloom china plates. I caught her breaking them on camera. My husband and I have family dinners at our house every month or so with our family. I have some sets of fine china that I like to switch out between the seasons that I've inherited from my grandmother. When we have our get-togethers, I serve dinner on these plates. My mother-in-law compliments them every time. My sister-in-law, however, has made comments to me that they're not her style. I honestly didn't think twice about her comments up until this past February, when one of my plates was put in the sink, broken. I chalked it up to an accident. In April, we had another dinner. This time, my sister-in-law was carrying both her and her boyfriend's plates to the sink and accidentally dropped them both. Again, no biggie at all. In May, she broke 2 more plates, and in June, she broke a plate and a cup. At this point, I was catching on. I brought up these concerns to my husband, and he brushed them off as accidents. I told my mum, and she said that she thought that my sister-in-law was doing it on purpose, and she got me a camera to put in the dining room. In July, we had dinner, and I had an opportunity arise. My mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and her boyfriend joined us for dinner. While our plates were still on the table, my mother-in-law asked how my plants were doing, and I said I'd show her. I told my husband to follow us outside so he could show her the plant that he's growing, leaving my sister-in-law alone with her boyfriend. When we came back inside, 5 minutes later, her plate was broken. When they left, I pulled up the camera footage. I saw her stand up when we walked out, peek around the corner, and then throw the plate on the ground. I kept this video to myself. All I'll say at this point is, are you sure she's not Greek and it's just tradition? I jest. This brings me to this past weekend. We had our family dinner and we were joined by my in-laws, my sister-in-law and her boyfriend, as well as my parents, siblings and niece. I served everyone, saving evil sister-in-law for last. I brought her food out on a child's plate with a sippy cup and got those kids' silverware with the plastic handles. She looked at me confused and said, I think you mixed my plates up with your niece's plates. And I said, no. My niece is responsible enough to eat on a grown-up's plate. If you're going to act like a child in my home, I'm going to treat you like a child in my home. She tried to play coy, but I had my iPad ready and I played the video to everyone at the table. She started sobbing. She swiped the kid's plate off the table and stormed out. My in-laws both apologized and offered to pay for replacement plates, but I told them not to worry about it. Despite this, we still had a nice time. When everyone left, my husband told me I was out of line and cruel. But I told him that this has been happening for months, and I've told him it was bothering me multiple times. It's Wednesday, he's still being a little cold to me, and I also got a text from my sister-in-law's boyfriend asking me if I'd apologize to her because I really embarrassed her. I sent him the video again, and he left me on red. My husband just called me to ask if I was taunting her boyfriend because his sister called him crying that I was. Now, somebody has asked in the comments down below, inquiring minds need to know, why would she break your plates? Because she doesn't like to eat off something that's not her style? Yeah, I agree. That is one of the weirdest things I've ever heard. How can you have a style of plate that you like or dislike at someone else's house? Opie replied, I would like to know too. I'll probably never get a straight answer though. My husband apologized, and now we're bouncing back and forth off of the whys, and we're kind of circling around to the boyfriend. My in-laws say that's when they've noticed a behavior change. She's gotten into trouble since dating him. They act like teenagers. My husband is saying exactly what I was thinking was happening. He's trying not to blame or pin anything on her because she has been behaving differently over the past few months. She got caught shoplifting, and her boyfriend also got caught stealing and went to jail. No diagnosis that I've ever known of, but the family is now saying there could be a deeper issue or possibly a substance issue. Someone else also commented, I'm glad that your husband apologized. What made him come around, if I may ask? OP said, my mother-in-law, at least I'm assuming. She texted me that they were on the phone when he was on his way home. That's my bet. I really want to talk to him about all of this, but I don't want to overwhelm him, especially because he's been a little distant. I think the whole thing is overwhelming for him. He told me his sister called him 4 times. I'm keeping it low-key for now, but I'm going to try and get some answers about the plate breaking. All right, then there we go. Quite a long story. The good thing about r/traumatize them back is that you do get some short, fun posts. I don't know if fun's the best word there, but you know, snappy little ones that you don't have to concentrate on too much. And then you get some longer, more in-depth ones like this. I just want to know what is wrong with the plates. I really do. How can the style of a plate have that much of an effect on someone's life to the extent that they want to break them? I mean, absolutely insane. Shout out your mother-in-law, by the way. Like, what a goat. Saying, you know what, I know what's going on here. Here's a secret camera. Set it up. Let's watch this back together. Oh, actually, it was your mum, wasn't it? But still, I feel like your mum and your mother-in-law both did well here. Your sister-in-law, less so. I do kind of feel like your husband, though. It took a lot of convincing here. When she'd broken 6 or 7 pieces of heirloom china, yet, apparently, according to him, you're in the wrong for embarrassing her. Where's the logic there, my friend? I mean, yes, it's good that he's come around, but it should not have taken him that long. And now for our final r/traumatize them back of this episode. Mother tries to spank teenager and regrets it. I'm well into being an adult today, and this is a story of how I stopped my mother from ever spanking me again. My mother has always been fond of physical punishment. She's a pusher, slapper, hit with random objector, and a spanker. I got spanked a lot for things I did, and things that she perceived I did. She spanked me well into being a teenager as well. I was 16 or 17 at the time, and my wet towel from showering was on my bed. My mother always lost her mind over not hanging a towel properly, and frankly, this was a mistake I made often. She came in while I was dressing, saw the towel, and she immediately grabbed and spun me to start spanking. I'll never know what devil took over, but it was a devil that had been needed much sooner in my life. Instead of crying out in pain, I said, and I can't quite believe I'm about to do this, guys, but I will, and I'm going to give it my all here. Oh! She was confused and asked, what sort of smart-ass response was that? My response was, well, after so many spankings, I was wondering when I would start to enjoy it. She looked horrified, left my room, and I called down the hallway, come back, we can take our relationship to the next level. I was never spanked again. I cannot believe I've just read that. That is obviously going to be the conclusion of this episode immediately. Well, despite the fact that I just actually cannot believe what I've just done there, and I'm really sorry if any family members are watching this or listening to this. It's probably my lowest moment in my life so far. That is the perfect example of r/traumatize them back. Your mum now, surely, is living with that trauma. In the back of her mind, yes, she might have thought you were joking long term, but she's always going to have those lingering doubts. Did my son enjoy sexually me spanking him? Makes you think. Really, really does. Stalk my daughters, I'll stalk you back. This was a few years ago. I think 2018, 19, pre-COVID at any rate. So I'm a bit fuzzy on ages, but I think my sister and I am a woman by the way, were 30 or 31 and 21 or 22 respectively. But basically, we were followed by a strange man. We were on holiday at the time and we'd left our mum in a pub to go and grab a couple of cute things from a shop and to go play with a local stray cat who lived at one of the squares. She's since been adopted by a family. It's a place we've been going to since we were both babies, so we know our way around blindfolded and we generally feel safe in the area that we were in. Now on our walk back to the pub, we realised we were being followed by somebody we didn't know. He wasn't being subtle about it. So we walked a different way to try and throw him off before going back to our mum. As you may imagine, this was extremely alarming to us, particularly because we were in a foreign country. Our friend who owned the pub offered to call the police on the guy, since he was still obviously loitering around the corner. My mum, though, had a different approach. She was a formidable woman who didn't take any nonsense and was fiercely protective of her daughters. If someone like a Karen tried to start an argument with her, as once happened on a flight, they would quickly regret it because she always won. She once quit her job after one too many insults from her boss, knowing her boss couldn't function without her and would come begging her to come back, and she was right. So my mum decided to stalk this strange man back. My sister and I decided to follow along because it sounded intriguing. We watched as he tried to hide behind trees. It did not work, and eventually got so uncomfortable with my mum's relentless pursuit that he fled across the main road, and she pursued him even then until he was finally gone from our sights. That is amazing. I mean, this is just brilliant. It's absolutely comical in my mind. I just want to see this happen. This has to be turned into some sort of skit or something, or some sort of episode on a comedy show. I mean, it's just so good. What a great way to just completely unnerve someone and hopefully make this man realize that what he's doing is so creepy. I mean, it is also illegal, but just mainly just so weird. What is going on? Your mum, by the way? Absolutely legendary. I hope she haunts this man for a very long time, and to be honest, I mean, might as well keep up the stalking. It's so funny. Deceased father's girlfriend is going down. So this will be a developing story over the next few months. Just getting started. My father passed away 3 weeks ago. He was a hard worker, into real estate and a man of means. He has 7 properties, 5 cars and liquid cash. His girlfriend that chased him down 9 years ago was his carer until death. In the last 2 to 3 years, she began to isolate my father from his 4 kids. She'd attempt to keep us out of the home and stand at the door and say he was sick. We would push our way in and he never rejected us. I think we all know what she's trying to do here. November 4th last year, I went out of the blue to his house and he was lying there dying. I took a video. He was septic and wouldn't have made it through the night if I hadn't found him. I sent him to the hospital. He went back again a week later and was placed on hospice. This female dog, I've since found out, deleted my number from his phone. She then got him a new phone about 2 weeks before he died to confuse him so he wouldn't know how to use it. He asked my siblings and son for my number 3 times to call me before death, and he never called. Oh my gosh. I suspect that she kept him from calling. I must fill in this blank. She drove a wedge between us and talked to me like a dog from November to December when I went no contact. I sent a letter expressing my hurt and that I loved him. She presented an electronic will, leaving her everything. Now, e-wills are not valid in my state. She sent a text from his phone to hers back in January stating that he was leaving her 2 homes. It was in broken English, so I know it was her. Dad doesn't even text, he didn't know how. So, she is losing everything. Her car, the house they shared, everything. I'm even thinking of suing her for mental and emotional abuse of my dad. The car he bought for her is in his name. That's gone. Oh, and she also ranted over his casket at his children and grandchildren, all on video. I'm going to ruin her. Wow. Also, a quick update. We're getting temporary orders of administration over the estate and filing eviction tomorrow. And we confiscate vehicles this Sunday with sheriff escort. Winning. Well, that is amazing to hear. Wow. I mean, the ending for that is great. That is great to see that she's, you know, losing everything. It's just a terrible, terrible case, isn't it? It's a terrible story. Ultimately, though, I do feel like, is there not some form of like attempted murder charge here that you could be going for? I know you probably don't want to do this, and it's horribly morbid, and it's so sad and just very, very, you know, distressing for you and the family. But if you found your dad pretty much dying in front of you, well, you said dying, like he was septic, and it's because of her lack of looking after him, that's the reason why he's in that position, it has to be, then is there not a charge or a potential case for attempted murder there? I don't know. What you've got so far, the temporary orders of administration over the estate, the fact that she's going to be in a much worse place after your dad's death than she was before, despite the fact that, yeah, she clearly was just going for all his money and property in the first place. I think there's more you could do here. I don't know, it's up to you, but I do feel like there's more that could be done. Let me know in the comments down below. Is attempted murder not on the cards here? I'm not sure. Let me know. Annoying middle school attendance lady. Years ago, I called the middle school attendance office to have my 2 boys sent to the office so I could take them out of school for a family emergency. The attendance lady was not happy about this and went on a rant about how I should have sent a note with them a day or 2 in advance, and then she would have had them in the office. Now she has to send a student to each of their rooms to get them, and this could take 30 minutes. It's a very old building with no intercoms to each room. Sir, do you understand what an inconvenience it is for me to stop my students from doing an assigned task and have them go and get your children? I was trying to interject, but she wasn't having it. She continued on and on about how all of the protocols are in the student handbook if I would have just taken the time to read it at the beginning of the year. She then finally stopped long enough for me to speak. Mom, you're absolutely right. I'm sorry I didn't send a note with the boys. Now, unfortunately, their grandfather didn't give me advance notice that he was going to have a heart attack this morning. The surgeon performing his open heart surgery didn't give us any advance notice either. We have to leave town immediately. The stuttering and awkwardness was amazing. Honestly, it was hysterical and a great stress reducer while he was in surgery. My dad loves that story. Oh, so he survived. That is even better. Yeah, the word that springs to mind here is just Jobsworth. As I said, I'm very happy that your granddad wasn't actually dead. I thought he was, and then I thought it was going to be an extremely sarcastic response from your dad, something along the lines of, well, unfortunately, we didn't get advance notice that my dad was about to die, but at least he's still alive, and hopefully he could even laugh at this story. Absolutely insane. I mean, is it that hard to go and get students out of a classroom? Also, just send an email. That's what we did at my school. The teachers got an email and they were on their computers anyway. Or yeah, just send a kid around to go and get them. It's not that hard. And in familial emergencies like this, obviously it has to be done. You just haven't had the right D yet. So, I, a 19-year-old woman, only date femme folks. Sexual tastes are a bit broader. Much to the support of most of my family and all of my friends. The friends of my friends, not so much. One of those friends, unfortunately, had a Klingon in their circle. A jerk we'll call Bill. Bill has certain views on relationships and women, and is not very happy with queer people. He likes to make small comments on the fact that I only date women, and even more so, that I'm dating 2 people. Oh, the horror. And only one is a woman, the other being a femboy. Now, he got a bit drunk one night, and his comments were getting a little bit aggressive. I was cuddling with one of my partners and exchanging small kisses, but eventually he said 2 things that everyone should hate. The classic of, you just haven't had the right D yet, as well as a new one I'd never heard. You just need to try it once. I volunteer. Oh my gosh. My partner tries to stop me because she could see I was getting mad, but it was too late. Someone told me that once, I said. Then he R-worded me so I could try it once. Now I can't trust anyone who presents masculine, like you. He got very defensive over this, acting like I was accusing him of something and carrying on. He was promptly asked to leave by the friend he was connected to, and I haven't heard or seen him in 2 months. So, hurrah. Yeah, I mean, this one is just crazy. Absolutely crazy. Who in their right mind would ever say something like this? It's just insane. What are you supposed to even do in response to this? I mean, you didn't have to say what you did, but I'm kind of thankful that you did. Although, it doesn't even seem like he learned from that. He just, as you say, got defensive and then carried on. So really, I mean, did he actually learn from that at all? Probably not, which is just mad, but yeah, crazy. Although, I guess if you haven't seen him in 2 months, that is a good thing, but it shouldn't take you having to say something like this to him for him to not be around anymore. Also, I mean, your friend who is his friend, who brought him in the first place, surely should have realized he's just a creepy guy. I mean, like, unless he's just not a good friend in the first place, you should expect your friends to have good friends, I reckon. I mean, it's not up to you, but if they are in your same or similar circles, you can't be expecting someone like this to be knocking about. I mean, it's just disgraceful. I mean, you could also argue that, you know, how does Bill not know that he's gay? He just needs a good big D, for want of a better phrase, and it'll magically change him. Has he tried it? No? How can he possibly know? Customer asks, I have cancer. What's wrong with you? So I put my wig on the counter. Back during the mask mandate, I worked in one of the big brand jewelry stores commonly found in shopping malls. On this boring day, it was only me and my assistant manager, we'll call her Lisa, working. In the afternoon, a man, probably in his mid-30s, comes into the store. I do my usual greeting and get ready to work with him when Lisa clears her throat and pulls on her mask a bit. I didn't even realise that the man wasn't wearing a face covering, so I politely offer him a mask so I can help him. Of course, he goes on a rant, saying he knows his rights and the usual mumbo-jumbo we've all heard. I tell him, I'm sorry, but I have a weak immune system and I can't risk getting sick. This earns me a grunt and him snapping at me, I have cancer. What's wrong with you? I give him no answer and take my wig off and drop it on the counter in front of me. He sputters and tries to apologise, saying he didn't know. He then decides to tell my co-worker and me, both early 20s females, about his testicular cancer, talking way too much about his naughty bits for our liking. I guess that was his way of trying to diffuse the awkwardness and shame. I've walked to the other side of the store and my co-worker dealt with him. At some point, I heard him say to her, I'd ask what kind of cancer she has, but... Now Lisa and I share a knowing look. I never actually said I had cancer. My hair fell out when I was a kid and never grew back. That's all it is. No sickness, just my immune system being stupid. Oh wow. Eventually he buys an engagement ring and scurries away. I've honestly never seen a customer walk out so fast-paced. Lisa and I crack up laughing once we thought he was out of hearing range before going back to being bored on a slow day. That is actually phenomenal. I mean, it's a great thing that you don't have cancer, but also the fact that you slightly inferred that you did while not actually saying that you did, and him thinking, oh my God, what have I done, is so good as well. I think just to clarify what I mean here, I mean like it's a good thing that you don't have cancer. I mean, that's obviously a flat good thing, but I think it's also a good thing that you made him think that you did have cancer, despite the fact that you didn't lie about having cancer, which would have been weird. Him thinking that you have cancer, I think is a good thing and should, in theory, although I've said this with like everyone else in this video really, should in theory make him think twice about doing something similar in the future. But I don't know, guys. I mean, I'm just looking through this again. Does he, like, he scurries away and is obviously embarrassed. Will he do something like this in the future? I don't know. I also kind of do feel a bit bad for him. Like, if he has cancer, then it's just a terrible thing to have, obviously. So let's cut him a little bit of slack. He's probably going through a lot right now, but it doesn't excuse, you know, being really rude. And it also doesn't excuse not wearing a mask. I mean, surely you can still wear a mask when you have cancer. If anything, wouldn't you still want to have a mask on? I mean, more than ever, so you don't get, you know, you're not at risk of getting an infection which would make your immune system even weaker, right? Your friendly neighborhood cripple is back. This just happened today and I'm still giddy with glee. Hello, I'm your friendly neighborhood cripple. For those of you just joining us, I, a 50-year-old woman, am paralyzed from the bra band down due to a catastrophic illness. It's been almost 10 years since I was paralyzed and I have tons of stories which I share here for your enjoyment. To mitigate my disability and help me get around in the world, I have a power wheelchair and a service dog. I'm not exaggerating at all when I say the trash that comes my way could fill a 3-month supply of my colostomy bags and then some. For our newcomers, I am the way I am as I grew up in a suburb of NYC, was bullied constantly my entire school life, and grew up with an older brother. He and his friends made my life a living heck until I honed my sarcasm, sharpened my tongue, and learned to think quickly to give as good as I got. Usually, I ended up turning it around and making it worse for the person who insulted me. In addition to all of this, my husband and I recently moved from our lovely New York adjacent suburb to North Carolina. It's a lower cost of living, I still get excellent medical care, we've got a house that's fully accessible in a lovely neighborhood, etc. People here say things to you in a sickly sweet or very kind voice, but what sounds like a compliment is often an insult. Now that you're all caught up, on to the story. Today we went to Costco. My hair is a gorgeous dark purple, and as my service dog Cap and I are wheeling around, I see a shirt I like. I go to look at said shirt. It was one of those super soft casual cuts in an amazing shade of green. A younger woman, maybe mid-30s, looks at me and nods politely. I smile and nod back and begin checking out the shirt that caught my eye. She's next to me, also checking out the shirt, just in a different colour. She says to me, "You are so brave to have purple hair. I could never do something like that." In that, "Oh, bless your heart" tone. "Oh, no," I replied. "What's brave is a woman your age wearing that." A vague gesture to her clothes. What's wrong with it?" "Well, those jeans are definitely a choice. Plus, open-toed shoes when your feet look like that? I wish I had half your confidence. You'll have a great day." At that point, I decided against the shirt, since the shade of green made me look like a shade of corpse that was just not flattering. Not that any shade of corpse is flattering, but this was the least flattering shade of corpse I'd ever seen. Cap and I zoomed off to find my lost husband, leaving her to stare at her perfectly nice jeans and perfectly normal feet in perfectly normal open-toed shoes. I wonder what the frick was wrong with them. And probably wonder why a woman in her mid-30s shouldn't be wearing perfectly nice jeans with a perfectly nice sweater and perfectly normal open-toed shoes. I'll be living rent-free in her head for a long, long time. Until next time, because there's always a next time. Your friendly neighborhood cripple. Now, just some more info to add. Several people have raised the question if she was actually complimenting me. Sadly, friends, she wasn't. Her tone of voice was the one reserved for very stupid dogs, very stupid husbands, or very ugly babies. That saccharine, false sweet tone that indicates disdain behind what would otherwise be complimentary words. Like calling your dog brilliant because they started themselves awake by farting and give their butter look like it betrayed them. Now, I am guilty of that last one. Peggy does it regularly. And everyone, it's hilarious. Yeah, that is fair enough. I was kind of thinking, are you sure she's not actually complimenting you? But I guess when you're in real life, when you hear the tone, you would know if someone's being sarcastic. All right, guys, let me know in the comments down below, because this is the first time I've ever come across this user. And I've got to say, from the style of writing and just the general tone, I love this person. And I want to read more stories from them about similar sort of things that have happened. I can't quite believe I've not seen a story from OP before, but I don't think I have. Comment down below, do you want to see more from this user? Because I reckon, I've not had a look, but I reckon they've got loads and loads of posts that are probably equally as funny as this one. I mean, on this one, just well done. Well done. It's an unnecessary comment from anyone to ever comment on someone else's appearance or style when they're just strangers. So yeah, you just shut her up instantly. It sounded like you just clapped back right away. And you're so right. It makes it better that she's wearing normal stuff that probably looks pretty nice. Because now she's going to be second guessing probably her entire wardrobe and thinking, oh my God, what did she see? What can I not see? Why did she say this about my jeans when they're actually completely normal? It's so good. As you said, great phrase, rent-free. Grab my booty, have fun blowing your nose. This one happened just an hour ago. I'm still shaking a bit, but dang am I proud of myself. I was at the Wall of Marts, my first mistake, and I was bent over looking at craft stuff. This random man, late 30s, early 40s, decided it would be a great idea to grab a fistful of my butts. Of course, the dude does not know I'm a martial artist, so I was very surprised when I rabbit punched him square in the nose. He grabs his face and starts cussing me out. I cock my fist back and shout, and I'll do it again. He scurried off, still cussing up a storm. No, I didn't contact the police. Not my first rodeo, so I know they wouldn't do anything. I did tell a manager I'm familiar with what happened, so they could keep an eye out. Why am I so proud of myself? I didn't cry. I even finished my errands before coming home. I was not going to let a random jerk ruin my day. And there we go. If you weren't sure what r/Traumatize them back was all about, well, now you know. This is brilliant. He assaulted you first. You get to do whatever you want to him afterwards, in my opinion. Yeah, I know, like, legally you assaulted him back, but is that not self-defense of some sort? I mean, he can't get away with this, and now he's not going to do it again because of you. So you've done amazingly for yourself and for other women that this would probably have happened to in the future. Amazing. How a PE teacher put my sister in the hospital. So this is about my older sister, who I'll be calling Jane for this post. Now, Jane has asthma. She's had it ever since she was a baby and gets it pretty badly. We've had to spend more than one Christmas in the hospital because she had pneumonia, and the school was very well aware that she has asthma. She always had an inhaler on her, and the front office had a nebulizer for emergencies. And there were multiple doctor notes on file limiting what she could do. She couldn't play a wind instrument in band class. She was allowed to not sing in choir if she was having trouble, and if teachers ever took students outside while the weather was bad, she was allowed to opt out. She was in middle school when this happened, and all of the teachers got the memo except for the PE teacher. Not only did this female dog not believe that Jane had asthma, but she also didn't believe that asthma was real. She thought it was just something that kids come up with so they don't have to exercise. What? Alright, I've got to interject here, guys. Now, I would typically say that I cannot believe this, right? This seems unbelievable that a PE teacher, a qualified PE teacher, thinks that asthma isn't real. But maybe there genuinely are PE teachers out there that just like love fitness and exercise so much to the extent that they think that any kid that says they have asthma is actually just making it up. So I guess I'm not saying that this woman necessarily thinks that asthma doesn't exist or hasn't been trained to know what asthma is, but maybe she just thinks it's an excuse that kids always use. Okay, let's get back to the story. This caused a few problems, and Jane had been sent to the principal's office more than once for trying to opt out of gym class. She wouldn't get in trouble, but being reprimanded in front of the entire class and getting sent to the office is mortifying for a middle schooler, and she was sick of it. Our story takes place in the middle of winter, just before winter break. We live in a cold climate, and our winters get wet and cold, neither of which are great for asthmatic lungs. On this day, the teacher had them running the mile, but instead of having them run laps in the gym, she insisted they go outside, and kids would get in trouble for taking their coats because they had to be in uniform. Jane tells the teacher she can't run outside in this weather, and the teacher tells her that if she refuses to run, then she'll be sent to the office. Now, if you remember, middle schoolers' sense of self-preservation is non-existent, and Jane has balls so big that they impair her walking, so she decided enough was enough. This school had a track that was a quarter-mile long, but for whatever reason, the teachers never had kids run the mile on it. Instead, they had the kids run around the block that the school was on twice, while the teacher stood at the starting point with a stopwatch. What Jane knew, and the teacher didn't, was that at the same time Jane had gym class, our mum would go to kindergarten to pick up our younger sister. She'd seen Jane running the mile on nice days earlier in the year, and gave her a little honk and a wave. So imagine, if you will, my mother, a CNA, going to pick up her baby, only to spot her eldest daughter running around outside with no coat on in the middle of winter, struggling not to slip on ice in certain spots. Mum was annoyed. She pulled up next to Jane to ask what the heck she was doing, and Jane told her through chattering teeth that the teacher was forcing her to run the mile outside with the other girls. Mum told Jane to get into the car and drove around to the front entrance to rush her into the office, demanding they call an ambulance and get her a nebulizer for a breathing treatment and something to warm her up and get her circulation back, as she was literally turning blue. Jane was hospitalized. The school had to pay for the ambulance ride, pay for the nebulizer medication, and pay for the hospital stay. Mum chewed out the principal and the teacher, then the doctor did the same. The teacher was suspended and put under review, but for whatever reason, she didn't get fired. However, she did learn not to ignore doctor's notes in kids' files, and there was another incident like that in the 12 years it took for all of our siblings to finish middle school. And Jane continues to have the largest balls I've ever seen. Why is it always PE teachers, guys? That's my question. You just hear about them a lot. Everyone's had one bad PE teacher who just forces kids to do things that they don't want to do, just for no real reason. And I feel like I've seen at least 2 or 3 stories like this or similar to this over the years. Now, yes, not necessarily have they had this level of revenge, which was excellent to see. But, you know, on like Entitled Parents or Entitled People, you hear about teachers like this, PE teachers to be precise. It's pretty crazy that she wasn't fired, by the way. Like you've said at the end there that she did learn not to ignore doctor's notes in kids' files. Is that not the #1 thing to like do as any teacher, is read those files and know exactly what is in them? Surely. Like, yes, the point is to educate, but first and foremost, it's to keep the child alive, isn't it? Like, when they're in your company, you are their carer. That's insane. But yeah, shout out Jane for saying, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm just not doing this again. And shout out to your mum as well. You've lost weight. You look great. Slight backstory. About 7 years ago, I was forcibly moved out by my father. And after my mother tried to guilt trip me into dropping the associated court case, we went no contact for a while. She and I are on good terms now, but it took a while for us to get comfortable meeting up again. And this interaction occurred during our first meetup after that point. Because of how much this had affected my life, I'd been between jobs for a while and was severely struggling with the poverty of very abruptly having to fend for myself on top of the mental issues caused by the incident. Suffice to say, I was really struggling to have regular meals and was definitely not at 100%. It had been close to a year since she'd last seen me, and due to this intense poverty, I'd naturally lost close to 30 kilograms, 66 pounds since then. I was slightly overweight before and was now just slightly underweight. Don't worry, I wasn't skin and bones. Now, Mum was trying to be friendly, and I'm sure she did sincerely mean it as a compliment when she said, "You've lost weight, you look great," as she's also struggled with her weight a bit. However, I was still quite bitter and uncomfortable with seeing her again after the stance she took, and it wasn't exactly intentional weight loss. So I looked her in the eyes and said, "Thank you. It's from the malnutrition since I can't afford to eat properly." Guys, she went frickin' silent. I don't think she looked me in the eye for the rest of the meetup. I would never be so bluntly rude to her now since we're on good terms, but she really needed the reminder of how bad my life had become because of the incident. At least she bought me a F ton of groceries afterwards because of it, so I had some proper food again for a while. Yeah, I mean, that's a good thing, I guess, but she can't just like buy some groceries for you in the short term and that makes up for everything that's happened in the long term. I don't know what the incident was. Obviously, we don't know what forcibly moved out by your father means, but yeah, depending on the age this was or what happened, I mean, who knows if it's legal or not, but yeah, losing close to 30 kilograms by not being able to get, you know, the sufficient food that you need, whether that's the quantity or quality, whatever, or other stuff, you know, from the emotional abuse perhaps of what happened. 30 kilograms is nuts, given you were slightly overweight before. Wow. Like, it's not as if you were, you know, 200 kg and lost 30 and you're still overweight. Yeah, mental. But I'm glad that she now probably realizes what has happened to you, but then surely she should have realized that anyway. Shouting, "I'm 15, you pedo," at every guy who harasses me on behalf of younger me. I just found this sub and wow, I love it. I thought I'd share something I've been doing for a few years, which I think this sub will appreciate. I used to get harassed as a young teen, a heck of a lot, because I dressed alts, and therefore men think you're not a person, but a walking goth sex doll. I also worked in the biggest alt market in my city, and we would get so many guys in there just to harass young girls or try to manipulate them. I would try to be a cool aunt figure to these girls and guide them, showing them self-defense, etc. But honestly, the problem seemed to be getting worse and worse. One day, after I'd had to deal with a 14-year-old crying on me because a stranger said he was gonna finish in her hair, I was walking home from work and some guy started shouting the exact same thing at me. Now, I'm pretty lucky in that I don't look much older than I did at 14 or 15. People already said I looked 18. And in that moment, I had a wonderful idea. I turned around and screamed, "I'm 15, you freaking pedo." The friend I was with got the memo and joined in screaming pedo at them. At that point, we'd been walking through the busiest square in the city. Pretty soon other people started paying attention to what we were screaming and joined in till there must have been 20 plus people shouting at the guy with easily 200 others staring. I've never seen someone poop it so quick. It was absolutely hilarious to see him go from feeling so big and powerful to so scared so quickly. He legged it off and dived into a taxi, clearly scared that if he stayed, an angry mob would form around him. It was brilliant. I still do it to this day when I get harassed, if there's enough people around for it to work, and some of my friends have joined in too. Hopefully before too long, the message will spread around them and they'll all become too scared to harass anyone. Well, you know what, OP? I actually think you're doing the right thing here. Yes, obviously they're not pedos because you're over the age of 18, but they don't know how old you are. So yeah, they're running away because they have no idea, and for all they know, you could be under the age of 18. And what if you were under the age of 18 but didn't say anything? You know, it'd be terrible. So yeah, again, kind of like the first story, you've stopped this person from doing this again in the future. So yes, although you're telling a white lie, it's for the good of humanity. Have you ever sucked a D? There was a guy in my small animal care class back in high school who would always ask questions about my asexuality in a condescending tone. You know the ones. How do you know you're asexual if you've never had sex? Are you sure you just haven't met the one yet? How can you be dating, insert my partner's name here, without sex? So you're just fine with being a virgin forever? Almost every day while I sat with our class chickens, I was interviewed on what I do with my parts. His favorite of the questions was, how can you be so sure you're asexual if you haven't had sex? I tried to explain to him multiple times that I didn't need to have sex to know that I was asexual, that it's a thing you feel, or in our case, don't feel, like how someone would know how they felt about being with men versus women, or anyone in between. I used all the analogies I could think of, and he just wouldn't stop. One day, I had enough. Without thinking, I yelled, "Have you ever sucked a D, Mike?" I've never seen any person so shocked, like he'd just been told something that would forever change his trajectory of life. What? Have you ever had homosexual intercourse with a male? No. Well, then how can you be sure you're straight then? Huh, Mike? Stammering, he repeatedly insisted it was because he felt such a strong attraction to ladies that there was no possible way he could be gay. Every single time, though, I asked him again how he was so sure. Struggling not to laugh, my friend was trying to get me to lower my voice. Look, Mike, now the chickens are scared. You made me scare the chickens. Get back to me when you've sucked a D, Michael. Naturally, I got in trouble, but my teacher was chill and it was nothing more than a good scolding and a 2-week ban from sitting with the chickens. I honestly think I should have gotten in more trouble. I should have controlled my temper. Well, there's no going back in time, I guess. For the remaining 2 months that we shared class together, he never asked me how I could be so confidently asexual. Maybe he learned something that day. Maybe he was scared of incurring my wrath once again. We may never know. I still haven't gotten any word that he sucked a D yet, though. All right, and here is some chicken tax up on screen right now. I don't think I've ever seen chicken tax before on Reddit, but I will say the chickens look pretty lovely, especially like the white one. Is that racist? It wasn't meant to be, and it obviously isn't, but I just think the white one looks cute. Not that the black one doesn't. Could this stay in? Yes, because it's not racist. It's just unfortunate that I've said that. There we go, guys. I hope you don't take offense to that. It's just a joke. Well, it's not a joke. I mean it. I thought the white one looks cool. Anyway, yeah, let's just move on. And now for our final Traumatize them backstory. Tell the entire class about my depression while I'm in the mental hospital. Hope you don't mind me emailing the entire staff about your AA meetings. I have severe clinical depression, and I've been struggling with it for years. The teachers are always made aware of my hospital admissions, so they can be more lenient on late work after I get back, which I've never really had a problem with. Now, there was this maths teacher I had, let's call her Mrs. R. My dad is a recovering alcoholic and goes to AA regularly, which I'm very proud of him for. When he went to a parent-teacher conference with her for the first time, he told me in the car that he remembered her from AA and was surprised she got a job since she relapsed constantly. Now, I didn't care much about it since everyone has their problems and just decided to forget about him saying it. Now, I had to be hospitalized due to an unalive attempt. It was for about 3 weeks, and during that time I was doing math work to keep up with her class. When I came back, I realized that everyone acted very off when they talked to me. I was fairly confused, so I asked one of my friends what happened when I was gone. Apparently, a kid had openly asked why I was gone for most of the year, without any repercussions, and Mrs. R decided it was appropriate to go on a rant about how I was depressed and mentally ill, and that she hated how I was coddled by the school board. She also stated that if I was her child, she would beat the depression out of me. I was royally annoyed at the fact that she did that and thought it was a good thing to do to a kid that at that point was in middle school and was being bullied left and right. In a rage, I sent a mass email to the staff, stating that she was seen in AA and how uncomfortable I felt with an alcoholic teaching me stuff. Following this, she was terminated because not even the administration knew about her addiction and thought that it wasn't safe for her to be around children. Now, just want to make sure, OP, that you saying following this she was terminated, does that mean she was shot and killed? I hope it does. I fear it doesn't, but yeah, I feel like that is the only reasonable outcome here, is that she was shot on sight. Because the things that she's doing here are a disgrace, and yeah, it is kind of weird that her school wouldn't know about her alcoholism and her alcoholic past, but maybe she just hid it. I mean, that's, I'm sure, what happened, which is crazy to be an alcoholic that isn't recovered and is still, well, relapsing constantly, according to your dad. But yeah, having that person around children is crazy. Yeah, you did the right thing once again. To be honest, it doesn't really matter that she is an alcoholic or goes to AA meetings or relapses, whatever. Like, the fact that she's disclosing this to to her class, your classmates, and then saying all this stuff that she said. Like, it is absolutely ridiculous. She hated how you were coddled by the school board, and that if you were her child, she would beat the depression out of you. That's absolutely insane. For that reason alone, she should obviously not be in education. Ignore my medical issues and I get angry. When I was in high school, my doctor accidentally let slip that I'd been formally diagnosed with ADHD 4 years beforehand. My parents hadn't wanted me to use it as a crutch, so they just hadn't told me. I was furious and I immediately pressed to start medication and get education accommodations. My parents sort of sheepishly agreed to everything I asked for, and I started doing well for the first time ever. This is all background info. Well, I've got to say off the bat, that is some of the worst parenting I've ever heard. What on earth? Anyway, we moved and I was taking a freshman science class in my sophomore year because my old school had done what was effectively the sophomore science in my freshman year. I'm the 16-year-old new kid doing standardized testing with a classroom of freshmen I don't know super well. And suddenly, I have to go to the bathroom. My education accommodations allowed for bathroom breaks whenever because the medication I was on at the time included fun side effects like bladder control issues. I raised my hand and I asked a substitute teacher who was acting as our test proctor while our normal science teacher was on vacation. And she laughed at me. She said she wasn't born yesterday and no amount of accommodations would convince her to let me leave the classroom during standardized testing because I might meet up with a friend who had answers to the tests or something. I tried to argue with her and I got increasingly more desperate as I explained in hushed whispers what my medication did and its side effects. She continued chuckling and shaking her head with this stupid, bemused smile. I started crying before, wouldn't you know it, I peed myself. Honestly, the next bits are a blur. I remember the smile slowly falling off her face, and then suddenly I was in the nurse's office wearing gym clothes and listening to my parents scream at the principal in 2 different languages. My parents agreed not to sue if that substitute was fired. She wasn't able to get a job at another school in the area, and the district apparently brought separate charges against her for ignoring accommodations. She had to pay a steep fine. Now, thankfully, some popular kids decided that anyone who made fun of me about this wouldn't be invited to the cool kid house parties, so I was only teased a little bit. I still wasn't popular in high school, but at least my parents became somewhat more supportive of me and my educational needs as a result. I hope that lady enjoys her unemployment as much as I enjoyed watching someone sign my yearbook a few years later to P-Girl. Okay, well, at least your parents eventually did something that constituted good parenting, but I hope they realized their errors in the first place of not telling you about a serious medical condition that you have that obviously is going to impact your ability to learn. Maybe this happened a long time ago when things like ADHD weren't as understood or accepted, but if it didn't and they genuinely didn't want you to use it as a crutch and just learn to live with it, I guess, despite knowing the impact it can have on you, or it does have on you day to day, then that is awful. But yeah, okay, maybe they've now changed their ways, and as we can see by the end, they do care about you. I mean, yeah, just that first paragraph was shocking to me. Now, as for the teacher, I mean, yeah, she's just a complete write-off. What a horrible woman. To actually laugh at you while you are telling her, no, I promise you, this is not me trying to cheat or get out of the test or anything like that. Look at my docs. I mean, surely she has them on her system or something. Look at them. I'm on this medication because of my condition. Like, how can somebody who's a teacher laugh at you in that spot? It's just ridiculous. It's a good thing they got rid of her, no doubt about that. It's a shame that you didn't get the money though, as you know, you didn't sue, and she was forced to pay a fine to I don't know, the school, the district, whatever, not you. I feel like you deserve some compensation for such a horrible thing, and fair play to the kids as well for not bullying you about this. It would be very easy to do so. Not saying that they should, but I mean, if bullies are looking for a reason to bully, that's a pretty good one. So fair play to the kids for not doing that. But yeah, I'm sure this moment is going to stay with you and be pretty traumatic for your life. And yeah, I can't imagine what being in school and everyone knowing that you've gone through that would be like. Now for our second story. This one is brilliant. Steal my mail, have fun thinking you're cursed. I hadn't thought of this in years until my daughter brought it up and suggested I post it here. I'm looking behind us now, across the count of time, down the long hall into history back in the before times, in the long, long ago. 2020. I'm talking about 2020. At the time, I was living in the Midwest and my daughter was living in the Pacific Northwest. She'd started getting into haunted dolls, and when lockdown happened, she picked up customizing porcelain dolls to keep herself occupied. I sent her a few old dolls I'd found at thrift shops, but when I called her to see what she was going to do with them, she told me she never got the package. That's when she told me that porch piracy had become a huge problem in the town. She said that it had always been an issue, but since lockdown had started, they'd gotten beyond blatant. And it was an almost guaranteed chance that you wouldn't get your packages unless the mail person directly handed it to you. It got to the point that the thieves would literally follow the mail truck and would be walking up to the porch to steal packages as the mail person was walking back to the sidewalk. This, as you can imagine, annoyed me on a personal level. If I was going to spend my own money sending something to my daughter for her to customize, I dang well wanted her to get it, not some random mook off the street. I told her I'd think about it and get back to her, as there was a doll I'd found that I thought would be perfect for a horror customization. Plus, I wanted to support my daughter with her art, so I wanted to commission this doll specifically. The other important factors that contributed to this situation are that I'm pagan. I love ancient fictional languages, and I absolutely love being able to screw with people that deserve it. I spent a few weeks mulling the situation over in the back of my mind, and I eventually hit on a solution that borrowed heavily from the satanic panic, which I'd lived through as a kid. Since I wasn't sure that she would actually get the package, I decided to send a backup doll that I'd found and planned on sending with the original doll, just in case the original doll got messed up in a way that couldn't be fixed. The doll had a cracked face, was missing an eye, had a faded, stained blue silk dress, and the hair was a snarled mess. I found a shoebox that fit the doll with a little room to spare, and I got to work. Everything I wrote is approximated because I was an idiot and didn't take a picture before I mailed the box off. Stupid of me. Oh, that is a shame. I would have loved to see this. Anyway, first I aged some printer paper with coffee, crumpled it up until it was soft, then cut out 6 squarish pieces. I created 2 sigils and drew them on 2 of the pieces. One small one where the sigil took up most of the paper, and one larger one where the sigil was in the center but had plenty of room around it to write other stuff. The sigils were based on the phrase "F off thief" and "This is not yours." I also used a Gallifreyan translator app and created a symbol that translated into "May you perpetually step on Legos barefoot in the dark." Now I believe that Gallifrey is the language used in Doctor Who. The 4th and 5th pieces of paper had random symbols drawn on them, including alchemical, astrological, symbols from some 70s metal albums, Led Zeppelin in specific, and random shapes that I doodled. The last one I used a Klingon translator and wrote out "F you effing F," both phonetically and in the actual Klingon alphabet in a spiral that filled up the entire piece. I took the larger piece with the "Not Yours" sigil in the middle and wrote phrases cursing them unto the 100th generation, accused them of preferring goats as sexual partners, etc. in Norse runes, angelic script, and 2 other languages I don't remember off the top of my head. Then I burned some of the edges and some small spots throughout the papers. God, imagine being a thief and looking at that, being like, oh my god, what have I done? Once I was done with that, I rolled the largest piece into a tube, tied it with black and red ribbons, used wax to seal it, and tied it to the doll's hands over her chest with black twine. I then wrapped 4 of the pieces around the arms and legs of the doll, and I sealed them with wax, and stuck the last piece, the small sigil, over her face. I used a pentacle wax seal stamp to stick it to her forehead. I wrapped the doll in some ancient tissue paper that I found in my basement, and I put it in the shoebox. I added several red, black, grey and green quartz crystals, as well as some pinches of dried herbs and flowers from my altar supplies. I finished the whole thing off with a short note written on torn notebook paper that essentially said that I was grateful to get this cursed thing off of my hands, that I tried to seal the evil spirit possessing the doll as best I could, but I didn't guarantee it would work, and that it was the buyer's problem now. No refunds, no returns, and if the buyer died, it wasn't my fault. I went absolutely cheesy 80s horror movie with the note. It was completely histrionic and overblown. I figured that anyone sensible would think that this was a prank or a prop or some "I'm so dark and spooky" teenager trying too hard to be dark and spooky, but mostly I wanted to make my daughter laugh, or at least momentarily freak out whomever stole the box. Admittedly, I'd picked up this doll because it struck me as looking rather creepy to begin with, so all the set dressing fit the doll well. I wrapped the box in duct tape, then in brown grocery bag paper, added some more random symbols on the seams, and I mailed it off to my daughter. The aftermath. She said that she got the notification that the doll had gotten delivered, but that when she went to retrieve it, nothing was there. A few hours later, she was sitting in the living room when she heard a loud thump against the door and heard the sound of a vehicle speeding off down the hill. When she opened the door, she found a ripped open and hastily retaped box containing only two things: the doll buried in what looked like 2 full canisters of molten salt. She thought that was odd, but forgot to ask about the salt when she texted me to let me know the doll had actually made it. We were talking about the doll last year when she asked me why I'd sent it in salt. I asked her what she was talking about, and after she described how the doll arrived, I told her how I'd actually packaged it up. She was kind of bummed that she didn't get to see it in all its ridiculous glory, but mentioned that they haven't had a problem with porch pirates since then. So I guess the local porch pirates were so terrified of the curse that they might have unleashed on themselves that they've avoided this area since then. I genuinely thought the whole thing was so over the top and cheesy, it would be obvious it was fake. But whomever stole it the first time was so terrified that they had to drown the doll in salt to break the curse. I genuinely hope they step on Legos barefoot to this day. Well, there we go. I think that is the perfect story for this subreddit. Just absolutely genius. I'm kind of getting Mark Rober porch pirate vibes from this. But if anything, this is a level above, because that, yes, it did put their face out there. And, you know, they obviously got covered in glitter and sparkles and stuff. But this is like genuinely people might be thinking here, these thieves, that they are cursed. And the fact that they've had to pour salt on the doll to try and, yeah, whatever, break the curse or whatever, is ridiculous. I mean, yeah, you can scare someone, or you can scare someone for the rest of their life thinking they're cursed. I think there are levels to this game. Crazy stuff. Brilliant. All I can say is it's absolutely brilliant. I feel like the only way you can level this up now even further is somehow find out who that thief was. I don't know if that's possible, but just really try. I mean, really try. Find out where they live, then go and put the doll back on their doorstep with another random note saying like, no, this is your doll now. You are cursed forever. And that will ensure that they truly are cursed, I guess, in their mind, right? Thinking about this for the rest of eternity. I think you just have to go that one step further if possible. Okay, now moving on to our third post from r/traumatize them back. No, I will not be watching that. Thanks. A few years back, when I worked at a fairly large grocery store, there was this stint when the same co-worker would find me during my break and whittle away my already precious 15 minutes talking about whatever TV show she was obsessed with at the time. Now, I'm not great at watching the shows I actually want to watch, but I'm equally bad at telling people no, so often our talks would end with her insisting I watch whatever show I'd already forgotten the name of, and me sheepishly answering, I'll put it on the list. Then, for like the space of a month, she got a bug up her butt about one show in particular, 13 Reasons Why. Now, most probably know what that is, but quick summary for those who lived under rocks like myself: a teenage girl uses her graphically depicted unaliving to get revenge on the people that hurt her in life. For the first time, I told her, no, not my type of show, which seemed to be her sleeper agent activation, dedicated solely to making me watch this freaking show. Every day she'd bring it up, and we'd have the exact same conversation. I would ask what it was again, because I exercised it from my mind after the last conversation. She excitedly recounts the show, and I tell her, no, still not interested, in increasingly firm ways. Finally, I get tired of this game one day, and I cut her off in the middle of explaining the show for the millionth time. I put on my most chipper tone, and I let loose. Oh my god, you know, you love this stuff so much, I should totally tell you about how I tried to unalive myself last year. It's got all the stuff you love. Assault, unaliving, abuse that I still go to therapy for. Oh, but I didn't try to unalive myself in a cool teen drama kind of way. I just tried to step in front of a train. Oh, I can tell you exactly what it feels like the moment you make the decision to end your life though. That's what you want, right? The more I went on, the paler she got, trying to cut in since I was being loud and pretty much the whole break room could hear. She tried to apologize and act sympathetic to my pain, but I just kept going, giving more and more of the worst details until my break alarm went off. Oh, gotta get going. Thanks for the show, Rec, but I don't think I'm gonna watch. Bye. Shockingly, she stopped talking to me after that, and I finally got to enjoy my breaks. Okay, don't get me wrong. I feel like if I watch a good show and there's nothing sort of massively triggering in it, and I really want someone to watch it, whether it be a colleague or a friend or whatever, I will say, have you started watching that yet? It's really, really good. Trust me. Have you watched it yet? Now, hopefully I wouldn't get annoying with that, but I would keep saying it, you know, at least a couple of times, just to give someone a reminder if I thought they were really going to like it. Now, the difference is here with 13 Reasons Why, and I haven't watched it, I'm going to be honest, but I do know what it's about. That is a show that you probably wouldn't push onto somebody again and again and again. And I think after hearing, no, not my type of show, when you first explain it to somebody, you then probably wouldn't do it again. Now, I'm not saying that she should have known that you had this happen to you before, or you were in this sort of situation, but I feel like you probably get some sort of hint from someone saying, no, not my type of show, when it's a show about someone that has unalived themselves. Even still, like, even if it's not about them and they've had a history with this, if they just don't like that sort of stuff, then I feel like you back away after that one. But no, she just kept going and going and going. And the only way to stop her was saying what you said. By the way, what I'm saying is, like, if I recommended a movie to somebody and they said, oh yeah, I'll watch it, then I might ask them again in future. Oh, have you watched it, by the way? You really should if you haven't. If they said, no, I'm not going to watch that one, not my sort of movie, I would never recommend it again. That would just be weird, especially when it's a topic like this. Now for our final Traumatize Them Back post of this one. Want to accuse me of stealing? I'll make you look bad too. On Thursday, I found out I likely have thyroid cancer. While pretty treatable, and I'm sure I'll be fine, I've already survived cancer twice, and hearing that word again has been difficult, to say the least. After my terrible day, I decided to go to a local gas station and buy a trashy pizza and some snacks to hang out in the local park. I had to use the bathroom, waiting for the woman who was in the bathroom. Immediately after I closed the door, she started yelling at me through the door that she'd left her dollar. It took me a second to realize she was talking to me, but when I did, I yelled back to her that I didn't see it, but I'd be out in a minute. I finished up my business, and honestly, I'd planned to just give her the dollar if she couldn't find it, as I just happened to have a dollar on me. I don't usually carry cash, and she seemed somewhat frantic, like she needed it for a purchase. That was until she came out and started yelling at me that I stole her dollar, and how dare I steal a dollar from a homeless person. Honestly, thinking it was probably a scam, I didn't have the energy to deal with her, and I thought it was best to not interact. She continued to yell for a few minutes before huffing and puffing to the front. Someone helped her purchase whatever item it was she wanted, as she talked trash about me to everyone there. As she was leaving, she turned back to me. I was now waiting in line, and started yelling, "You're seriously gonna steal from a homeless woman?" Honestly, she seemed in a kind of rough place, so I probably shouldn't have, and I definitely wouldn't have usually, but I was at the end of my rope. So I snapped back, looking her dead in the eyes, and replied, "And you're going to harass a woman with cancer over something she didn't do?" Everyone got really silent after that, and she puffed out. Yeah, I might be a bit of a jerk for that one, but honestly, it felt good for a sec. No, you're not the jerk here at all, OP, in my opinion. I think you're completely within your bounds to say something like this. You know, if you're getting abused by some like rando, and they're accusing you of stuff that you haven't done, you can do it back to them when it's actually legit. It is. So yeah, respect, and well done for not letting her just get away with this and not giving her a dollar. I mean, I don't really know what her intentions were. It does seem as though it might have been a scam. Who really knows? Just a confusing situation all around, but I think you dealt with it perfectly fine. That's the thing, like, if nobody pulls her up on this, then she's never going to learn to be self-aware, right? And it takes someone like you saying something like that to hopefully make her change her ways and not do this thing anymore. I don't really know what it is. So yeah, good on you. Do it more, I say. Teacher insists I talk to my mother. This was back in school when I was 15, 16-ish. I'd moved to the area suddenly and had a lot of accommodations, so most of the teachers didn't know specifically what was going on in my life, but most knew it was pretty messed up, and there was an ongoing police investigation. I guess this teacher missed the memo. I was talking about prom tickets and how I collected them as I qualified for free ones. I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, so I'm kind of paraphrasing. My teacher said to me, "You just need to get your mum to email to claim as many tickets as you need." I replied, "Okay, I'll ask my dad to do that." She then mentioned a few other things, but every time she ignored my subtle corrections and asked me to talk to my mum. After like 4 times, I lost my temper and went, "Alright, since you insist, I'll drive for 2 hours, find my highly abusive mother in police custody and reconnect with her just to ask her permission for some prom tickets. Or I could ask my dad at home. She just went completely silent, and a couple of nearby teachers gave her judgmental looks, and I walked away. Teachers should honestly know better than to assume all kids have parents, especially both. There was another time, like a month after I moved, where we had an English class assignment to read and write poems about our mother. On Mother's Day, so it was already a pretty sore day for me. I just left. Should have written some poems about how she beat me for laughing wrong to teach them not to do that sort of trash. Yeah, that is extremely poor from that teacher. I mean, it's just one of those things. If you are a teacher and you have a classroom full of children, surely you shouldn't be talking generally about these sort of things. I mean, look, maybe you can, but on the whole, you've got to be so careful because who knows what you might say that could horribly upset someone. I mean, you don't know. Clearly, this woman doesn't know the individual circumstances of all her students. I think, to be fair, she should, but for whatever reason, she doesn't. And I'm thinking about my own education here. I can't actually remember doing sort of like Father's Day or Mother's Day stuff in particular, even in primary school or like even back in kindergarten. I mean, I don't remember exactly in reception, but I don't remember it. And I feel like the teachers would know exactly what was going on with their students' parents, so they wouldn't do anything that could be as traumatic as this, probably for that reason. But yeah, terrible from her, great from you, OP. I mean, you could also argue that she's just being misogynistic anyway. Like why does she keep insisting that you ask your mum? Because that's just assigning a gender role, isn't it? It's ridiculous, especially in the modern day. There's a lot about this teacher to dislike, I will say. So yeah, I'm happy you got your own back, OP. Keep touching my wheelchair when I told you no, get slapped and shunned. I am a wheelchair user. Wheelchairs are considered extensions of our bodies, and touching wheelchairs without the user's permission is a no-no. Moving someone's wheelchair without asking is an even bigger no-no. I'd explained to a classmate again and again that it was rude, inappropriate, and even harassment that he kept touching my chair or moving me without asking, and when I told him not to, not only did he keep doing it, but he was insistent that he had the right to do so. I'd even gone as far as to illustrate the issue to him by getting permission to touch his shoulder or elbows and moving him out of the way, or leaving my hand on his shoulder and leaving it there until it was awkward. Even this, though, didn't dissuade him or change his entitled insistence that he had every right to touch my chair whenever he wanted to, even when I'd told him no. Anyway, usually he'd let go, kind of scoff, and move on. This was over the course of most of a college semester. It was a voice class at a community college, so there were less than 20 of us. So our professor had witnessed many of these incidents. One day when he touched my chair again and wouldn't move his hand when I politely asked him to stop, he refused to let go, and again insisted that he wasn't doing anything wrong and that he had the right to do so, it wasn't a big deal, etc. By this point I'd had enough. He continued to touch me, my chair, and therefore an extension of my person. So I turned my chair around lightning fast, grabbed his stunned hand hard enough hopefully to bruise it, I've got good upper body and hand grip strength, pulled him down as harshly as I could, and then slapped him in the face as hard. The rest of the class heard the slap and his pained and surprised yelp, and they turned to look at us. He screamed and ran over to the professor to whine that I'd grabbed him and hit him. The professor just kind of shrugged and said something along the lines of, "Well, she told you to stop touching her." He kept whining about it to the professor, that I should be punished for assaulting him, etc., only for her and the rest of the class to just ignore him that day, and then for the rest of the semester. Mind you, I'm a very chilled person, unless you count childlike excitement, glee about life, and I'm never violent, as well as being patient to a fault, so I don't retaliate nearly ever or easily, but frankly, this was self-defense, pure and simple. In any case, the whole class had heard me explain time and time again not to touch me or my chair, and how and why it was inappropriate, and they'd asked if I needed help, but I'd always declined. To me personally, it's not that big of a deal if someone who doesn't know better touches my wheelchair. I just explain why it's wrong. But he was so entitled that he had the right to and wouldn't take no for an answer. That was what made that an actual issue. And I'd been much more patient than he deserved. He wasn't very bright, but he wasn't disabled or autistic. I'd asked about the autism in a polite way by sharing that I'm autistic. But even if he were, he'd be high functioning enough for his action to be inexcusable. At the end of class that day, I got a lot of high fives and he kept his distance from me, occasionally glancing over at me fearfully. Good prudence, frankly. The last third or so of the semester, nobody wanted to work with him when we paired up in groups of 3 to 4 to work on songs together. People for the most part didn't love working with him before this anyway, but after it became clear that the professor was on my side and not his, it was if he was invisible. Okay, now on the one hand, while I'm happy that the professor was on your side and this kid just got ignored for the rest of the semester, I do have to say, where was your professor before it got to this stage? Like, why are they letting you slap him? Why are they letting it get that far? Like, that should never have been allowed to happen. How can the professor genuinely think, okay, you know what, I see all this going on, but I'm just going to let it happen and let this student, OP, eventually slap one of my other students, and that would be a good resolution, a good thing to happen, and that's the way to sort it, rather than stopping it at source and saying you can't do this before letting it get violent. It's weird teaching, I gotta say. Like, you're just being harassed all semester and they're just leaving you to it. Really odd. Look, don't get me wrong, this guy's clearly a POS, and it's good that he got what he deserved in the end. But my main takeaway is that Professor has to do more here. Joke's on you, he's dead. A little context before I start. 6 years ago, my dad died of terminal brain cancer after 2 years of treatment. I was 9, turning 10 that summer. My mum was absolutely devastated, but she stayed strong for my brothers and me. Also, we live in France, and it's an advanced country, but we live in the backwaters, where there are still a lot of misogynists and homophobes. And just to add a little more intrigue, it's a 5-day bank holiday weekend here in France, and it was nearing the end of the workers' shift. Now, my brothers aren't at home much, and I'm at boarding school, so we didn't need our huge car anymore. My mum sold it and replaced it with a brand new Hyundai electric car. It's a lot smaller than what we're used to storage-wise, so she wanted to buy a roof box for it. She went into the shop and asked a female worker where she could find one. The woman called over her male co-workers to help my mum out. She asked them what she asked the woman. Could I have a roof box for my car? They stroll over. The leader smirked as he says, "Is it for your husband?" His friends laughed, and so did their female co-worker. But my mum didn't even smile. Instead, she grimaced and said, "Well, he died 6 years ago, so I don't think so." The guy was mortified. As she told me this story in the car after picking me up from school, I was so proud of her because she was able to make some light of our trauma. Also, she taught a misogynistic idiot a lesson. Well, there we go. Second case of misogyny in this episode. I think this one was probably worse than the first, like trying to get a cheap laugh out of it and then just being hit by that. What a way to bring you back down to earth. Again, massive shout out to your mum though. I mean, you've got to take a leaf out of her book and start remembering these comebacks for when it sadly inevitably happens to you later in life. But the fact that she can deal with it so well and not kind of like cower away. Like, she's not afraid of talking about this sort of thing. She's not ashamed by it, doesn't seem. She just wants to, you know, put people in their place, despite the fact that it's obviously a horrible, horrible, traumatic thing that's happened to your family. So yeah, respect for saying something uncomfortable, which I'm sure she didn't enjoy saying, to be honest, or even like thinking about. But this guy and his mates have led her to say it. Guy asked me why I'm wearing a mask. Some background information first. My city was mostly anti-mask through all of COVID and continues to be. I don't agree with this, but it's a smaller town, so it was easy for people to get away with. I actually wore masks before COVID because I suffer from dermatillomania, basically a mental condition where I struggle with peeling off sections of my skin. Oh wow, that sounds terrible. I was shopping at the grocery store with my husband and we were wearing masks. I turn around the corner of an aisle and a man looks at me and asks, "Now what are you wearing a mask for?" He was loud and clearly looking for an argument, so I just tried to brush it off and say, "I have a medical condition." I tried to look for my husband, but he was still in the other aisle. The man then asks, "Oh, what kind of medical condition?" I'm blown away by the audacity of this guy, but at this point, I hear my husband come up behind me and I suddenly feel courageous, or maybe dumb. I pull down my mask and show him the rest of my face. He sees the wounds and some bandages. He looks embarrassed and quietly says, "Oh, honey," before walking away. My husband immediately turns me around and hugs me, since he worries about my self-esteem, asking if I'm feeling okay and such and what that was about. I just answered, smiling, "Well, he asked." I pulled my mask back up and we continued shopping. I realized after that I should have just kept my mask on, but it felt good somehow. I also don't know if I was right to call it a medical condition or not, but I kind of panicked in the moment. This was in early 2021, so 3 years of therapy later, I've been doing much better with my condition. I don't pick as often or as much skin as I used to. Now, I usually don't even wear masks anymore to hide it. I wish I had this kind of confidence back when I had my grandmother say I looked like a meth addict. Well, you know what? I feel like grandmothers just do say stuff like that. Don't take anything from it. They're just all crazy. No offense. And I know that my grandmother is actually probably watching right now. And I don't mean you, Granny. Trust me. Anyway, back to the story now. I feel like, OP, you've done extremely well there. And you know what you're saying about maybe it was bad or you didn't feel comfortable or whatever, that it felt good? It should feel good. You completely killed this person phenomenally well and embarrassed him. So well done. And also, you don't have to keep your mask on. I mean, he did ask you to take it off and you did that. So, I mean, you're just doing what he says. Excellent stuff. You want proof I'm injured? Okay, this happened about 5 years ago, so some details are a bit blurry, but I remember most of what happened. About 5 years ago, I had some major anger issues caused by other undiagnosed mental issues. I'm okay now and I'm properly medicated. I ended up slamming my door, which caused my mirror to break and slice my left leg open. Stupid mistake, I know. I've learned since then. I ended up going to hospital to get about 48 stitches. I had to miss a couple of days of school because the doctor told me to take it easy for 2 days. When I finally went back to school, I had crutches because I couldn't put any weight on the injured leg at all. I got an elevator key and I needed people to help me with my books. I kept pain meds with the nurse because, again, 48 stitches. She never liked me for some reason. So when I went to get half a pill during lunch, she refused to give it to me. Here is how the exchange went. You don't need any meds, you're fine, the nurse said. No, I do need them. I'm in a lot of pain. I'll stop faking and go back to lunch. Oh, and leave your crutches here. You don't need them either. Now, I was in a lot of pain, so I was already not in a good mood. This really angered me. Do your dang job and give me my meds, then I'll go back. I have an ungodly amount of stitches in my leg, and I'm already upset enough without you being rude. Well, how do I know you're actually injured? You could just have a bandage around your leg. What, you want proof? Yes. So without hesitation, I untied the gauze on my leg, removed the gauze pack, and showed her my stitched wound. All the colour drained from her face, and she looked like she was going to throw up. Is this good enough for you? After a moment, she silently unlocked her medicine cabinet and handed me my painkiller bottle, which was literally just extra strength ibuprofen, not opioids, so I've got no idea why she was so protective of it. Take your pill and go back to lunch. I smiled at her as sweetly as possible. Oh, well, I can't go back now. My bandages aren't sterile anymore, so I need to change them. I brought extra bandages just in case, so this wasn't a big deal. She still looked nauseous at this point, so I changed my bandages as slowly as I could, making sure she got a good look at my leg the entire time. I only had to go back to her office twice during my recovery, but each time she didn't hesitate to give me my medication. I saw her when I went to return my elevator key, and she avoided eye contact with me. She wasn't working there the following year, luckily. Well, I wonder why. Okay, now go with me on this one, guys. I do feel like there are a lot of people out there that have jobs that they're just not very good at, okay? Who knows why, but it just probably is the case. Not naming names here, I just think that is the case. However, when you're a nurse, I feel like, you need to be pretty good at your job, or at least know what you're doing. If you're a healthcare professional, you need to be providing healthcare. That's kind of the job description, and I don't think you can be bad at doing that. Otherwise, it can be potentially very dangerous. Now, I do not understand how this woman had this job in the first place when she is not giving you medication that you have to have. It's just insane. Also, the questions that she's asking you are a joke. First of all, are you actually in pain? How do I know if you're injured? Can you give me proof that you're injured? Etc, etc, etc. All three of those are ridiculous for so many reasons. First of all, you don't have to be in pain to have pain medication. If it's like prescribed to you to take 3 times a day, and you take it 3 times a day and you're never in pain, that's good. That means it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, right? You've been prescribed it for a reason. Secondly, are you actually injured? You could just have a bandage around your leg. Is mental. Surely she's had some form of documentation before she needs proof that you are injured, right? Like, if you go to hospital and you have 48 stitches, your school obviously should know about that. If not, something's gone terribly wrong there in communication. I don't really know why. And then thirdly, saying to somebody, I need to see proof that you have 48 stitches or that you need pain meds. is unbelievable, especially when they're coming in on crutches. I mean, look, yeah, some kids do lie about being ill, but I don't think someone would lie to this extent. I mean, maybe they would, but this is just insane. Also, just one final point. Why is she not offering to redress it for you? Like, I'm glad that, I mean, I assume she was eventually fired. The fact that she's not working there the following year leads me to believe so. But after clearly realizing that she was horribly wrong there, surely she at least could have said, oh, you know what, I'm sorry, let me do that for you. As in, do my job. Not just watch you do it yourself and be nauseous. Also, she shouldn't be nauseous. She's a nurse. She should be used to that sort of stuff. Everything about this woman is just so backwards. Now for our final Traumatize Them back post of this episode. Don't ask rude and invasive questions and you won't get called out on it. My God, this just happened. I'm still fuming. Some important context. I have a zit the size of Everest tucked in next to the corner of my eye. It's recurring and it will go away soon. It's no big deal, it's just massive. I work reception and a woman came in having made her reservation for the wrong day. No problem, I can at least look up the reservation information. While I'm doing so, she goes, "What happened to your eye?" A lovely question to ask the person trying to help you. I blink and tell her, "It's a pimple." "No way! There's no way that's just a pimple." Then I pull the saying out for the first time. I'm shocked you feel comfortable saying something like that to a total stranger. I have genetic cystic acne. But unbelievably, she doubles down. "Well, my daughter has acne too." I say nothing. "She doesn't really talk to me about it either." I double down. "Well, I don't like to talk about it. It got me made fun of when I was younger." Cue the breathy comments about how I, as well as some guys she's texting, are calling her a POS. If that's what you got from my very calm and decently polite responses, maybe you have some introspection to do. Enjoy your visit, and I hope you think twice before making comments about someone's appearance. Now, fortunately, while the cystic acne is indeed real and genetic, I wasn't ever picked on for it. At least, not until I reached adulthood, for some reason. You know what? I cannot actually believe that this woman has said, I can't believe it. My daughter has acne too, and for some reason, she doesn't like talking about it either. Yet, she's asking a total stranger about her acne. It's just, obviously, she's just so dumb. So dumb. And yes, I agree. You have a lot of introspection to do. But fair play to you, OP, again, for just saying, you know what, I'm not dealing with this. Just because I'm here to help you out, and I know I'm working reception, you're a customer, whatever. I'm not going to sit here and take that from you. You've got to know that this is just too far. You can't be asking this sort of stuff. And you know, if you are this woman and you're thinking, why is everyone calling me a POS? It's probably because you are. That is the logical answer to that. It was bound to happen with how poorly you treated him. My biological mother and I were never really close. I'll even state that she never really loved me, because honestly, my life would have been worse if she did. This was far from the first thing that made me want to go no contact, but I was 10 years old and literally unable to at the time, no matter how much I begged the courts to let me stay with my dad. I don't love much. She pretty much made it hard to love anything, because if she noticed I did, she'd do her best to remove any good meaning I could have had from it. From clothes to TV shows, to toys, and even highly sentimental gifts from deceased family members, they were ripped away from me because she threw them out and took away everything I had to still remember them. And when I was 10, me and my brother got goldfish. I think they were a gift from my dad's company, but my dad had cats and was worried about them killing our fish. So after a talk with our biological mother, she allowed us to take them to her house. Unfortunately, my brother's fish died early on. A mix of stress and my brother not caring about them. But mine were living, and I'd even named them. Mysteriously though, my fish were dying. Flounder had gone first, then Seb, until Stripe was the only one left. I'd cried a lot for them, and I'd become highly protective of Stripe. I'd moved him to my room, I cleaned his tank every day, I changed his water as often as I was suggested to. I even noted down how much food he'd been eating in a day. I'd finally convinced myself that Stripe couldn't mysteriously die if I wasn't around, and I finally left him alone for a bit to play with my siblings. I thought everything would be fine, but then I heard my bio mother shout about how unclean the tank was. I was angry because I'd just cleaned the tank that morning, and I walked over to see my bio mother grabbing his tank. I asked her what she was doing, and she just responded, "I'm cleaning this out since you can't seem to be able to." It had taken me a moment to figure out what she meant by that, but she had a pot of boiling water on the stove and a cup of steaming warm water on the counter. By the time I realized what she was planning, it was too late. She'd grabbed Stripe from his tank and dropped him into the cup of steaming water and started to dump out his tank. I was screaming, crying, and doing whatever I could to stop him from dying, but between the hot water and the sudden drop, there wasn't anything I could have done. I had held him for a long while, just silently crying, while my bio mum was acting like it was unavoidable. I remember her telling me, "It was bound to happen with how poorly you treated him." She finally got fed up with my lack of response and flushed him down the toilet. I hated her for it. I hated her so much. It was 100% avoidable, and I eventually learned she'd been the one killing my fish the entire time. But the entire time she acted like I was in the wrong, like it was my fault that I felt that way. My dad didn't understand, and nobody else cared about a fish. Some even offered replacement fish, which I turned down. I'll also admit that I had been wanting to unalive myself for a while. I tried to by drowning on purpose when I was 9, and this had been one of the last straws that I could handle. I wrote a note, one specifically for my bio mum. I don't remember what I'd written, but I do remember that single phrase she loved to repeat about Stripe. It was bound to happen with how poorly you treated him. I can't recall how many times I'd written it down. I can't even mention how many notes I'd written, or which one I eventually put on the bathroom sink where I'd intended to die at age 11. I didn't die, but only because I didn't want my siblings to be the ones to find my body. I had no clue what to do, just knowing I didn't want to die where they could see. I handed the note to my older sister, and I just started walking. My uncle eventually found me and dragged me back home, but I'd just been so numb. I eventually found out that my bio mum had kept the notes. Yeah, all of them. Years later, she asked me about them and the repeating phrase, demanding an answer that would make her look better in front of her friends. She hadn't expected me to respond the same way that I always would. After you killed my pet and told me it was just bound to happen with how poorly I treated him, it stuck with me just how poorly you treated me. Wow, and there we go. That is the end of the post. OP has just added a little edit on the end to explain who these friends were and how his mum got in contact with them. He says that she met those friends in an online support group for parents with depressed children, and they'd realized they could meet up IRL and did. These people were good, and I spent most of the time already seething because I had to listen to my bio mum lying to them about a whole lot already. Not just about me, but my siblings and other family as well. When I got called out to say hi, I was highly disinterested and ready for them to go away so the lying would stop, because my bio mum loved to pretend we were such a nice family when in front of people. I zoned out most of what they said, chiming in with corrections when needed, while getting kicked under the table as my bio mum lied her way through more. Now eventually, the topic of one of the nice mother's sons SHing came up, and she asked me a question about my scars. I did tell her that anything sharp or anything that could be made sharp was enough to harm yourself with, and I gave advice to avoid cans in the house and to check for missing or sticking out nails, etc. And eventually it turned darker into her son's unalive note where he'd cried for help and begged for the pain to go away. That's where my bio mum chimed in, ignoring everything I had to say, and that's when I butted in again. We fought a bit in only the way an abuser can fight with a victim who honestly couldn't care less anymore could fight, and I got sent to my room. Now those friends were there obviously, and they were appalled enough to call CPS, but that went nowhere important. She was later kicked from the support group though, and none of them wanted to be friends with her anymore. And I guess that is the reason as to why OP's mum, bio mum, was asking OP years later, what is it with that note? What did you mean when you said what you said? I think, to be honest, she was just looking for an excuse to go back to those people with and try and rekindle some form of friendship, but they clearly just saw through her. Wow, a terribly sad start to this one. I've just been thinking for a couple of minutes there as to any potential reasons, or if there's any sort of way that I can try and work out as to why this mum might be doing this sort of stuff. As in, like, is it jealousy? Is it just manipulation? Is it kind of like protecting? Is it just whatever? But the only thing I can really think is that she's just like sick in the head. Like, even if you were just trying to be a horrible person, surely you wouldn't go to this length with your own child, right? Something just must be mentally wrong with her. But that is the beauty of this subreddit. At least we got a little bit of revenge. her friends realizing how horrible she was as you spoke about her, or I guess to her, in front of them. I hope she was just terribly embarrassed and, you know, just her face went white and she just didn't want to be in the room anymore. Because the fact that she has put herself in that situation, in a group of friends, mums, parents, that have depressed children, they're all probably extremely sad and just trying to do whatever they can to help their kid. Yet she must know, I mean, she is clearly sick and twisted, but she must know that she is the one that's caused her own kid's depression. Yet she is like fake being in that group, being like, oh, isn't it so sad that our children are in such a bad headspace? How do we change this? How do we, you know, make things right? But she's the one that's doing that. It's just like, it's actually disgusting. So yeah, I mean, overall, I think she is just sick and twisted. I mean, yeah, at least you got a little bit of revenge back, but I don't know. I don't think it really compares to the childhood that you've had. Okay, now for our next Traumatize Them Back post. Be nice to your pharmacist. I lived in an area with lots of old folks. One day, I had to take my kid to pick up a prescription for her mum. As it happens, it must have been a busy day for the pharmacy. There was a pretty long line. I keep the kid in the shopping cart, do a few laps, get some groceries, and come back. The line's still pretty long, but I decide better to just wait it out this time. I'm behind this older couple, just trying to keep my toddler entertained. And as I do, I notice an old woman force her way to the front of the line from behind me. Now, I'd been waiting for a while, 10 to 15 minutes or so, and I'd moved up a few paces already, and I was supposed to be next. She makes it to the window and leans in against the plexiglass with her hand over the divider and starts snapping her fingers. What the heck is taking so long? I've been in line forever. False. The pharmacist, who is clearly frazzled and looking for somebody's who's been more patient prescription, turns and says, I'll be right with you. Well, I'm here right now, and I need my dang, insert obscure drug name, that I was supposed to take last night. Well, dang, it sounds like you should have planned better. The pharmacist assures her she'll be right there to help her. My kid and I stop what we are doing and watch as the woman turns from red to purple, waiting on bated breath for the unwarranted reaction that is sure to come. Somebody needs to get the F over here and help me. I need my dang drugs. This incompetent girl can't do her job. The woman who is working the drive-thru window turns, asks the car to wait a moment. Mind you, the drive-thru was just as long of a line, hence why we went inside in the first place. She comes over looking equally as frazzled as the other pharmacist. She calmly asks the lady to step to the next window. The lady sighs, pushes her cart over, and they begin going through the standard questions. The cashier leaves to go to her computer to look it up, all while the other girl is still trying to help the first couple. The old angry lady keeps ranting about how unacceptable this is, and this never used to happen. This generation is lazy and inconsiderate. Speaking to nobody in particular, but oh, I was listening. The drive-thru lady comes back. Sorry, Mum, we haven't received the order from the doctor. Until we get the prescription, we can't fill it. I'd be happy to call them when I can to try and expedite that, or you can call and see if they can send it over. The lady screams, I'm not going anywhere until I get my frickin' pills. Okay, I'll call them when I'm able to. She walks away. Now it's my turn at the register. I'd worked customer service for years. I still do as a server. Don't be rude. Pretty easy rule. I push my cart up. I look at the poor frazzled young girl behind the counter and I turn to the angry woman. Wow, it sounds like it's a pretty important prescription. Yes, it is. I needed it yesterday. I could have taken it already, but I interrupt her and say, well, it's pretty insane to me that you're being so terrible to the people who are going to fill a bottle with what could be your life-saving medicine. I know I wouldn't be that brave. The look on her face. I turn to the cashier and I say very plainly, wow, she is terrible. I turn and she storms off. I pick up the prescription and carry on with my day. A good rule of thumb, be polite to the people who give you things you intend to ingest. I'm not saying it was gold by any means, but the quiet thank you from the cashier had me floating for the rest of the day. Okay, this is really good. I reckon that as you turned to this horrible woman, she definitely thought that you were going to completely side with her and just back her up and yeah, just say exactly what she's saying, that this is a joke, this generation is lazy, I need my pills now. But no, you just said the complete opposite to her face. And it needs more people like you doing that for her to stop being so entitled and horrible. And yeah, obviously, you know more than me. I've not worked in customer service, but you definitely made that woman's day. And I'm glad that you got some satisfaction out of helping her out as well. Now for our third story of this episode. My teacher wouldn't let me use the bathroom during a test, so I peed on her carpet. The title makes me sound like some super cool rebel engaging in some sweet malicious compliance. No. In fact, I was a shy little beanpole struggling with undiagnosed ADHD and a bladder condition. In 7th grade, my English teacher had a rule that if you didn't bring back your book, you couldn't take bathroom breaks. Let's ignore that having access to the bathroom is a right and not a privilege, okay? I was always a forgetful child. I've lost pencils, stuffed animals, jackets, glasses, and much more from a very young age. At the same time, I was also a kid who would wet their pants and bed all the time. Neither of these issues were properly addressed or diagnosed until I was in my 20s. Still don't really know what the bladder thing is at 28 years old. Needless to say, I did not do a great job of bringing my book in. During a test, I had the strong urge to go to the bathroom. At that point in time, my urges were accompanied by a leak that made it through to my pants and did not leave a lot of time to hold it. I walked over to her desk, keeping my skinny little thighs pressed together to hide the wet stain. When I asked to go to the bathroom, I was given a firm no. Now, I was a kid that followed rules religiously and was uncomfortable speaking up against authority figures, so I waddled back to my seat and tried to finish my test. There was a lot of squirming, thigh squeezing, hand pressing, and grimacing, but none of it stopped the inevitable. Not only did I massively wet my pants, but it filled the empty space of the plastic seat and dripped into a puddle that soaked into the carpet. I thank whatever deity is out there that there wasn't tile. The people around me would definitely have been able to hear it happen, and I probably would have burst out into some very ugly crying. Holding back tears, I raised a trembling hand and had to whisper that I had an accident. Her attitude did a complete 180-degree backflip. She started fumbling her words as she worked out a plan. I would hold onto my test at my desk and wait until the bell rang. The classroom would be empty for about 30 to 45 seconds between the English class walking out and her study hall kids walking in, so she could call my 8th period teacher and explain that I wouldn't be there. She would have the kid whose chair I drenched sit in a different seat, and I'd be able to ride it out until school was over. I sat through a silent study hall with a book planted in front of me while I battled the tears I wanted to cry. When it finally ended, she scurried off to my locker with my combination on a sticky note and came back with my gym clothes. She then stood guard outside the narrow window alongside the door while I changed. A janitor arrived before I left, so I had 2 people to shakily apologize to with very wet eyes. My mum told me that my teacher contacted her with some very emotional apologies and many promises to let me use the bathroom whenever I needed to. She apologized to me as well and generally was much kinder. She'd previously been pretty cold because of the aforementioned forgetfulness. At the time, this event didn't feel like a traumatized them back moment. I didn't start owning the issues I dealt with until my mid-20s, and now I actively embrace them. I'm very open with my partner about when I'm having particular symptoms and have advocated for myself medically to find solutions, admittedly only partial ones. It's horribly sad to think about how much I let embarrassment and shame dictate my life. It kept me from having sleepovers, made me miss field trips, and contributed significantly to my social anxiety. Looking back on this negative experience, however, makes me feel a bit satisfied that the person who actually should be ashamed, i.e. the person who disregarded someone else's needs, was clearly traumatized to a degree. And I certainly don't let people make me feel ashamed of my limitations anymore. Wow, you know what? Controversial opinion here, but I reckon that this teacher is actually a nice person, just from the way she reacted to this. Now, I know a lot of you are not going to agree with that, but that is genuinely what I'm getting from this. If she felt like she had to apologize to save her job, I don't think she would have apologized to you, OP, either. Yes, I understand that in the moment, she probably thought that she had to apologize to OP's parents in case they took it up higher, you know, went to the headmaster, whatever, or headmistress, whatever. But I feel like she genuinely was really sorry that this happened and really ashamed. And I feel like she now probably won't do this again. And I also feel like, you know, there are kids in school that do very often just forget their books or just don't bring them in on purpose. And she probably had come to this sort of solution as a way that may well have worked in the past, you know, forcing kids to bring their books in as they're supposed to, or they can't go to the bathroom. Now, is it like right? No, clearly not. But maybe it worked in the past to stop kids that were just trying to get out of working or learning. However, yeah, I don't know. You comment down below, guys. What do you reckon? Do you think I'm being a bit too naive here and she just got caught out and was covering her own back? I actually genuinely think, just from the way OP's described it, that she has been traumatized by this because she actually is a decent person. She just didn't realize how badly she got this wrong. Now, does this take away from the fact that this is a horrible thing to go through and would obviously cause trauma for OP? No, I'm not saying that for 1 second. So whatever my sort of interpretation of the facts is, the fact is, this was still a terribly traumatic thing that OP went through. But I don't know, that was just my overarching feeling. Let me know if you agree. I mean, no doubt about it, she has to just learn, or hopefully she did learn from this, that she needs to have more compassion to her students no matter what. Because, yeah, treating the bathroom as like a privilege is a really terrible thing to do as a teacher. So I'm not saying that that's not. But yeah, interested to hear your thoughts. I don't think that a lot of you are going to agree with me, but that's what it's all about, baby. Get your comments in down below. Sorry, I know I'm rambling here, but I remember in my schooling, in primary and secondary school, so both, which is, you know, from the age of 4, maybe not in primary. I mean, I don't remember fully in early primary school, but say from the age of like roughly 9 to 18, or at least 16, we weren't allowed to go to the toilet during class very often at all. Only if you really, really insisted that you had to go, would you be allowed. And sometimes you wouldn't be allowed. The teacher would just say to hold it. Now, as we saw the story the other day, it is different, and it should always be different if you do have a medical condition. However, in this situation, you didn't explicitly say you had one because you didn't know and you were ashamed of it, etc. So, no, that's a little bit up in the air, and that is just a real shame for you. But I remember in my schooling career, not being allowed to go to the toilet. That was like a school rule. And they just said you need to go between periods. That was it. So again, was that a bad thing? Was my school bad? No, it was very good. So I don't know. Again, I want to hear your thoughts. Get them in. Let's end this episode now. Get your comments in down below. Grope my backside, get punched in the face. This happened over 20 years ago when I was at university. I was a 21-year-old student studying at a university in a coastal town in the south of England, and I was on a night out with 2 friends. I wonder if it was the same university in a coastal town in the south of England that I went to. Who knows? There were only 2 nightclubs in this small town, and they were both of dubious quality. Okay, it definitely could have been. The first club was fairly empty and had 0 atmosphere, so we went to the second, which was known to be a bit rough and seedy. I wasn't keen on the idea, but I wasn't very good at countering peer pressure back then. My instincts were screaming at me, no, this is gonna end badly. But not wanting to look like a boring party pooper, not like I give a dang now at 45 years old, I followed like a forlorn sheep that was full of existential dread. Sure enough, the place was packed, but the bloke to bird ratio was about 5 to 1, meaning that men significantly outnumbered women, and that is never good. It means that as a woman, you are doubly conspicuous and you stand an almost certain chance of being harassed or molested by drunk, horny men. I took a deep breath and went to order my drink. It was a double Jack and Coke. I could really put it away in those days and not wake up with a hangover. Sigh. I'd not even finished my sentence when I felt a hand on my butt. The reaction was automatic and instinctive. I spun round and gave him one with a left hook. It's a punch I'd perfected. I was taught to box by my father. But this punch was a cross between an uppercut and a hook, the latter being often called a roundhouse punch in martial arts circles, and I knocked this drunken pillock on his arse. I'd punched him to the floor. I'd somehow managed to hit him hard enough to knock him off his feet, but not enough to KO him or cause any significant damage. Size-wise, he was about a foot taller than me, but slender. He was no beefcake. Him being so close, it was hard to get the proper momentum, as I couldn't swing my hips to do real damage. He was exceedingly inebriated, so looking back, it would not have taken much to upend him. The element of surprise was on my side. Like the famous Led Zeppelin song, he was dazed and confused. I was still screaming at him, "You do that again, I'll have you done for assault." I wasn't expecting his reply. He got to his feet and apologized and gave me a $5 to get myself a drink. I got myself another Lemmy and told him I was keeping the change by way of financial compensation. A $5 could buy a couple of drinks back then. Needless to say, he didn't argue. Wow, there we go. Phenomenal start to the episode. What I will say is this. If every time a man did this to a woman, this happened, a man would never do this again. That's for sure. Now, I'm not saying that women should punch men like this. Obviously, that is not a good solution here, and it shouldn't ever come to that circumstance. Ever. But maybe, I don't know, maybe it will take a few women just decking some men for people to finally realize you can't just do this sort of stuff. I mean, obviously there are better ways to get that message across than violence. For example, proper sentencing and maybe some more harsher laws put in place. But yeah, a good slap or a punch once in a while, I am all for it. I mean, hopefully you did still call the police, by the way, because this is still illegal. But yeah, great revenge nonetheless. Don't touch my kid's hair. My 8-year-old daughter has very red hair, leaning more towards auburn. She's never cut it. We call it the Long Hair Don't Care Club because mine is pretty long too. Hers though is so long that she has to pull it out from under her when she sits. She loves her hair. So do her father and I. Every redhead knows that in public, people will always try to touch it. Mostly older white ladies. So the story. An older white lady in the grocery store goes to touch her hair. She's used to people trying to touch her and hates it, and very vocally told her, "Don't touch me." I've taught her to be loud about it because it will embarrass and stop most people, but not this lady. A few aisles over, we are picking what type of crackers she wants, when this old female dog comes by again. My daughter has a sparkly pink baseball cap on with her ponytail through the loop. This freaking woman grabbed her ponytail and ran her hand down it and said, "Oh, it feels so nice." I replied, "Well, it should, considering it's a wig and you're complimenting a cancer patient on someone else's hair because she doesn't have any." This woman turned white as a wedding gown. I said, "Stop touching her or I will touch you." Cue the clutching of pearls and turning beet red. She starts to apologize and tries to reach to my kid yet again. My daughter told her, "If you touch me again, I'll bite you." She left us alone after that, but I got a few stink-eyed looks from her for the rest of the time we shopped. We check out, I'm loading my cart, and lo and behold, this female dog was handing my kid a Hershey bar. My kid crossed her arms tight and told her she was allergic, which she isn't, but also lol. So I guess all that hammering of never take an offer from a stranger with candy stuck. Screw that lady. Can I just say, shout out to your daughter, by the way, who at 8 years old is just an absolute boss already. I'm sure she takes after her mother, but goodness me, phenomenal from her. Just to downright lie to this woman and say, "No, I'm allergic, I'm not having a candy bar." So good. So good. I mean, yeah, I don't know why this random woman is interacting with her in the first place, but yeah, so good from her. And then also to just scream at her, "Don't touch me." So elite. I mean, saying, "I will bite you," that's just top tier. It's, again, perfectly reasonable and I love it. And I don't know why this woman came back again. I mean, obviously, touching your kid's hair in the first place, such a weird thing to do. Imagine I just go to the shop and I'm like, I see an 8-year-old kid and I'm like, "Oh, wow, your hair looks so nice. Let me just touch it real quick." What's wrong with you to do that? But yeah, as I said, great response from your daughter, who I presume has been taught very well by you. I matched his energy and he didn't like it. This happened on Monday morning. I work in a doctor's office as a receptionist/admin. It's a specialty clinic with many different specialists, so we're constantly busy. Cue Mr. Jerk. He comes into the office and doesn't even wait for my colleague to turn her head before he coughs to get her attention. Because she works for a different specialist, she pointed and directed him to my desk. Oh, joy of joys. I book him in and ask if he has his health card with him. He says yes, then stares at me until I tell him that I need to see it before he can get his testing done. He smiled smugly and said, "Now you can have it since you asked properly." So I knew what kind of man I was dealing with. He sits in the waiting room and as soon as his butt hits the chair, he starts talking at, not to, the other patients. It starts off with the typical racist trash of how immigrants are taking over and there's no jobs left for real Canadians. And of course, he's got a booming voice, so not only can everyone in our clinic hear, but all the other clinics, including the eye surgery clinic on the other side of our wall, can hear him. I can feel my anger rising, but I just wanted him to get in so he could get out fast. I reached my limit when he said, "Women don't want to work anymore. All they want to do is spread their legs on OnlyFans." I got out of my seat and confronted him. I said, "Excuse me, but this is a completely inappropriate conversation for a doctor's office, and it's incredibly offensive." He replied with, "We are having a private conversation, so go back to your desk." I told him it's not a private conversation if everyone in the building can hear him, and he is in a public setting. He told me to close the doors to the waiting room. I laughed and I told him that I wasn't going to do that, and he's not my boss, so I don't need to do anything he says. One of my bosses, a doctor who is an immigrant from Jamaica, came out of the office to see what the commotion was. He came up to me and asked what happened, which I explained the above. He spoke to the man to get his side and to listen to the other patients' versions of what happened as well. The doctor asked me if he gave me an apology, would I accept it? I told him it wasn't just up to me, but to all the reception staff that could hear him. They all said they'd accept it, even though I wanted to say no with every fibre of my being, so I also agreed. Of course, as you can imagine, the apology was forced and fake. I watched as the doctor went to shake his hand, and he looked at it and said, "No thanks." I went back to my desk and just stared him down, matching his stare back at me. Finally, he went into the testing room. I told my colleague, he's probably expecting me to hide from him when he comes out. I'm just going to keep watching his step until he's out the door. 30 minutes later, he's leaving and his eyes are watching me just as intently as I'm watching him. I'm leaning back in my chair with my arms crossed. There was no way he was intimidating me. As he gets to my desk, he smirks and gives me a condescending wave. Fine, whatever. As he's now got his back to me, I'm still watching him. As he turns to go out the door, he can see me again, so I blew him a kiss. He was so angry. He gave me the finger and tried to slam the door that has a slow close. I spent the rest of the day laughing and became a legend in my office. The other patients in the waiting room all came up to me and told me I did the right thing. I'm also glad I have amazing bosses who had my back and laughed when I told them the story. Mr. Jerk is not allowed in our office under any circumstances. Let me get this straight. This guy has said women don't want to work anymore in an office surrounded by working women. If that just doesn't prove to you what sort of guy this man is, then I don't know. I don't know what will. Now, I will say this. This guy is an absolute bigot and should never be allowed in anywhere near your institution again. But goodness me, I mean, how do people like this exist? I want to know about this guy. Like, you know, how old is he? What's he done in his life? Is he in a relationship, and with who? There's just so many questions. Why does someone like this have these opinions? It's so dumb. Like, it's actually insane. Even if I was doing like a comedy skit about the most bigoted person I could think of, I don't even know if I'd go to this sort of length. I think it would just be too unbelievable. But clearly people like this exist. And yeah, well done you, OP, for not backing down to him, not giving him what he wants, and standing up to this absolute jerk. Now for our final traumatize them back of this episode. Teacher's poor choice of punishment terrorized my bully better than I ever could have. This isn't the greatest story, but I was thinking about it after reading another thread. This happened when I was in 5th grade in the early 80s. My mother had recently divorced my abusive father, and I was at a new school. I'd be in different ones for several consecutive years. I was overweight and female at a time when that made me fair game for both children and adults to bully me. Somehow, at 10 or 11 years old, it was seen as my choice and poor judgment that made me be overweight, not hormones, stress, poverty, etc. Q still having disordered eating and anxiety well into my 40s, but that's another story. I'm not sure when it started exactly, but there was a boy in my class that picked at me incessantly and made comments about my weight, clothes, appearance, etc. He never did anything physical, and he never said anything loud enough that an adult would hear him, so it wasn't obvious, but I imagine that my teachers were aware. One day, I finally snapped and started yelling at him to just leave me alone in the middle of the classroom, in front of the teacher. My teacher decided that even though up until this point I'd been a quiet, model student, and even knowing this wasn't the first time that I'd been picked on, she didn't care to figure out whose fault this was, and she sent us into a large storage closet together to work it out. The closet was probably a 6x6 space, so not tiny for two 11-year-olds, but I was so scared about being punished at all and so freaked out about being in a confined space with someone abusive that once we were in there, I immediately broke down into hysterical crying and started hyperventilating, and I couldn't stop. He was horrified at my reaction, and I think on some level he may have also understood how unfair it was of the teacher to have chosen that path. That poor kid could not apologize enough in that moment, and was absolutely terrorized by being locked in a closet with a girl who sounded like she was about to stop breathing at any moment and who would not stop crying no matter what he said. I don't know how long she left us in there together, but that kid was in tears by the time we got out of there and never spoke to me again. And in general, I was picked on far less afterwards by that entire class of kids. Wow, what a weird story. Yeah, the main thing I have to say here is this, the teacher, what is she doing? Like, yeah, 11-year-old kid bullying, not good. It's not good, but, you know, that's not the worst part of this story at all. Why is she putting 2 kids in a, I don't know what measurement this is, by the way, 6x6, maybe like 6x6 feet, even if it's meters. It's just weird. Why are you getting locked in a room as 2 11-year-olds? Is that allowed? Is that school policy? I don't think it is it? That's just baffling. The teaching ability here, or just dealing with 2 students that have had a falling out in this way. I've never heard anything like it, but yeah, that's why I don't really care about the actual kid that's been bullying you, or just even the outcome of the story. I more just can't believe the fact that your teacher's done this. Is she a psycho? She's got to be fired for that, doesn't she? It's like, is she just thought to herself, oh, let's go for 7 minutes in heaven as a punishment for 2 kids, and hopefully they get along after that. It's just really weird. I mean, I guess the good thing about this story is that, yeah, you got picked on less after that. I just can't get over the fact that you were locked in a room with another student by your teacher. Surely that can't be right. I don't know. If it's right, comment down below and tell me I'm wrong. But I just don't think it is. A lot of you watching right now, over half of you aren't subscribed, which I really do find that quite disrespectful. So like, it does actually hurt me. And I know I'm kind of waffling here, but it's one of the reasons why I struggle to fall asleep at night. Just knowing that you guys are out there, you know, listening to this, watching this, but you haven't followed or subscribed on whatever platform you're on. It's just hurtful, guys. It just makes me sad. I thought you were better than that. Let's get into the video. I told him I'm gay. I'm a straight male in my 20s, living in an area of Florida that's known for its retiree population, even among Floridians. This is where native Floridians go to retire. As such, there is a disproportionately high number of racist, homophobic, and sexist old people running around my area. I work at a local library, so I have to put up with their abuse on a daily basis. Like I said, I'm straight, and I promise that's relevant. I also wear earrings, like a lot of them, and necklaces, bracelets, and rings. My nose isn't pierced yet, but I'm planning on it soon. Same for tattoos. I've been told that I look like a punk rocker on a permanent Hawaiian vacation. This is not a look that certain people appreciate, but I don't care. Part of the appeal of looking how I do is annoying people who look down on anyone who's other. One morning, a few months back, I was in a grocery store before my morning commute. I was just grabbing a donut and chocolate milk to have a driving breakfast. I'm waiting patiently in line, minding my own business, when a voice from behind me says, "Take that metal out your ears, boy. You look like a homo." I turn around and see an old guy who probably should have died of old age before I was born. Working with the public and dressing in a manner most of them find distasteful, I get this kind of abuse all the time. At work, I can't say or do anything unless they get really rude. But now I finally had a chance and I decided to take advantage of it. My first instinct was to lay into him, but I had to get going and I knew that was the reaction he wanted. So instead, I pretended to misunderstand him. I smiled at him and I said, "Thank you. My boyfriends love it. They think I'm so cute." He didn't respond or leave or anything. He just kind of looked at me with his mouth open. I gave him a big smile and turned away. He didn't say or do anything else, but when I got up to the cashier, he smiled and said, "You do look really cute." I wish I'd turn around to see the boomer's response, but unfortunately, I didn't think to at the time. I think what you did there, OP, is the exact right way to go about this. Just embrace it. Don't give them what they want. Just embrace it. You are the winner here by a mile, making them uncomfortable. If you said, "No, I'm not gay. What are you talking about? These are my earrings," and you like rose to his terrible sort of homophobic chat, I think you're right. He would be the one that won there. That's what he wanted. But doing this and saying, "Oh, thank you. Not just my singular boyfriend, but all my boyfriends love them." So good. You are definitely the victor here. Real proud of my comeback to an airplane Karen. I have relatively wide shoulders and was flying middle seat in economy. I was coming back from a work trip on a full flight from New Orleans to Atlanta. about 1.5 hours. About 5 minutes after takeoff, the aisle seat Karen was acting real restless, squirming and sighing and rolling her eyes and scoffing. It was clear it was because I was using the armrest between us. I tried to make as much space as possible for her, but given my size and seat, I couldn't really do much. Then she snapped at me, going off about how nobody is impressed by your muscles. You take up way too much space. No one wants to deal with sitting next to meatheads like you. Blah, blah, blah. So I interrupted her little rant and very politely, but very loudly, replied with, "Miss, why don't you simmer down? This is a short flight, and if there's one thing no one wants to deal with, it's a crying child on an airplane." Window seat and folks across the aisle burst out laughing. Karen was beat red and seething for the rest of the flights. Okay, well, there we go. I love seeing a Karen get beat down. You guys know this. Not physically, of course, but yeah, verbally. However, what I will say is this, and this is something that I think everyone should understand. Airplane protocol, seat protocol is like, it's such an inherent thing. If you're in the window seat, you have the window. And there is a, whatever you call it. I'm doing the sign on the screen. But yeah, the armrest, the window armrest you get. I can't remember if there is a window armrest. I believe there is. That's yours. If you're on the aisle, you get the aisle, right? Which is better than the middle seat. And you get the aisle armrest. That's yours. And if you're in the middle, because you're in the middle, and that's obviously the worst seat, I think that you should therefore have dibs on both middle armrests. Simple as that. So if she's getting annoyed because you've got one of the middle armrests, or you know, your right arm is on the, or whichever way, you know, whichever side you're sitting on, you're taking one of her armrests in her opinion. I think she's just wrong. And yeah, just because you go to the gym, that doesn't mean that you have to give up an armrest. Just silly from her. But yeah, great comeback. She asked me when I was due. I told her I was 12 years old. For context, this happened when I was around 16 years old. I've always struggled with severe endometriosis, and an unfortunate side effect of endo is severe bloating or endo belly, usually to the point where I look very pregnant. Even after 2 surgeries, I still get it sometimes at 26 years old. At the time, I was 5'6" and about 100 pounds, so I looked like a pole with a huge bump sticking out. I lived with my parents at the time, which was in a small conservative beach town in Florida. Lots of old judgmental people. Okay, I feel like this might take place with very similar people to the first story. 16-year-old me was walking around Walmart, minding my own business, ironically looking for maternity pants because the bloating gets so bad. A woman, probably in her 50s, walked up to me, placed her hand on my stomach happily, and said, "Oh my god, when are you due? You look amazing. You're so young." Now, this wasn't the first time I've had someone ask me this question, but it was the first time that someone had the audacity to put their hand on my stomach. I stood there for a second, just shocked, and then said, "Oh, I'm not sure. I'm only 12. My mum knows all that stuff about pregnancy." She immediately turned pale, took 3 steps back, and let out a nervous chuckle. I just stared at her, smiling, holding my stomach, as she mumbled something under her breath and walked away. I still try to come up with funny things to say in these situations, because it still happens today. No one's ever put their hand on my stomach since that day, but I have been asked when I'm due so many times. If anyone has any good responses to this I could use as a 26-year-old, please let me know. Okay, well now you're at the age of 26, OP. I would say that, I mean, it's unlikely that the 12-year-old thing is going to fly for that much longer. So if you really want to go crazy, I would go for, it's not a baby, I'm not pregnant, it's a very, very cancerous tumor and I'm going to die next week. Depends what you want to go with, like how harsh you want to be, how bad you want to make someone else feel. I will say this, the fact that she's actually touched you, a stranger has touched your belly, is actually mental. Like, you know, comments, maybe you expect that once in a while, but actual physical touch from someone you don't know is so mad. But yeah, I mean, I'm very, very sad that you suffer with endometriosis. You've said down below, a little bit more context, there's no cure for it. The current gold standard for treatment is laparoscopic excision surgery with an endometriosis specialist. Ugh, sounds tough. But yeah, it's up to you. I'd probably go as harsh as I could, to be honest. I know it's a little bit tough, but do you want to make these people feel really uncomfortable? Yes? then there's no limit. Mormons need to learn that not everyone can be saved. I am female and live in a predominantly Mormon area of the US. I was a single mother until my son grew up and moved out on his own. I actually grew up and was baptized as Mormon, but I became disillusioned at around 12 years old, and I spent the next 20 years trying to get them to excommunicate me. It didn't work, so I finally resigned. Now, for some reason, the Mormons doubled down on trying to salvage me after I resigned. They sent missionaries to my house more often than others in the neighborhood. I finally managed to scare the missionaries off for 16 years, I suppose, after 16 years. That's insane. They'd cross to the opposite side of the street that my house is on, at the bottom of my street, and only cross back at the top of the street. Even men I work with are trying to push the issue. The latest one was giving his spiel on the ride into work. I looked at him and I said, "You have worked with me for the past 3 months. Why on earth do you think I would be a part of such a male-dominated religion? I make my own money, I support myself, I supported my child until adulthood, and I don't have to do what anyone says other than the boss. I swear, drink, and I smoke. What about that leads you to believe that I want some man in a suit telling me how to live my life?" Now, this dumb idiot actually had the nerve to then try and tell me that the Mormon religion is not male-dominated. I then asked, "So women are allowed to hold the priesthood and wear slacks to church now?" Not another word was said the rest of the ride into work, and he found a different carpool the next day. The missionaries knocking on my door today reminded me of that conversation. I ignored them and continued cleaning the bathroom until they went away. Now I'm off to plot how to scare them away for 16 years a second time. Oh, I see, so you actually did scare them away for a whole 16 years the first time. Wow. I'm thinking of having a door sign saying that religious peddlers will be sacrificed to the old gods, but also thinking of answering the door and saying, "Oh, I thought the coven said they didn't have any blood sacrifices available. Come on in. It will just take a few minutes to set up the altar." Oh my goodness me. Now I want to know what you did, OP, to scare these guys off for 16 years, and then after 16 years, why they came back. I mean, to the extent that they were crossing the road to avoid your house. What did you do? There are actually a couple of updates to this one, which might enlighten us. The first is this. I decided to go the nice route with getting rid of the missionaries. I called my cousin, the bishop, that helped me get rid of the missionaries the first time this morning, and I let him know that they were becoming a problem once again. He agreed to make the appropriate calls and get me back on the no contact list. I'm very thankful for everyone's suggestions. You're all the best. Thank you all. And update 2. I'm going to spend some time at Thanksgiving dinner at my mother's tomorrow, trying to find out who sent them after me again. If I find out, I'm going to donate $10 in their name, with their address included, to Scientology. Alright, social experiment time, guys. And I do mean this. If you're a Mormon, can you comment down below and just tell me about being a Mormon and why you're a Mormon? If you like it, why other people should be a Mormon. That's it. I don't want to give any more thoughts on this story, but I just want to social experiment. If there are any Mormons watching or listening, comment down below, because I genuinely do want to hear. Well, I don't know. I don't think I've ever interacted with a Mormon before, so I'm just interested in anything. And I will say that people that are trying to convert you again and again and again and again, it's too much. But yeah, I'm interested. Comment down below if you're a Mormon, and we'll have a conversation. Pharmacist judged my meds. I have severe and chronic treatment-resistant depression, and I have for over 30 years. I take 30 mg of an antidepressant, which offers just enough relief that I don't KMS, while my doctors and I continue to look for other, newer, or more effective options. I've been a part of a good amount of clinical trials over the years, and I've more recently tried TMS, ECT, and the full treatment of esketamine to little effect. I called my pharmacy for a refill, and the guy who answered and took my info saw my prescription and said, "You shouldn't be on that much. The limit is 20 mg. I can't send in this request." Now, it is the limit for some diagnoses, but not others, and he doesn't have my diagnosis info, as far as I know. I replied with, "If I only took 20 mg, I'd be dead by now." Cue awkward silence. He stammered, Well, I guess it's between you and your doctor then. I'll just send in that refill request." I just said thanks and hung up. He's not young, he's not new. I've seen him there for a decent amount of time. He should know better, to be honest. Oh, and also, that same med is prescribed for up to 80 mg for another diagnosis. I wonder what he'd do if he saw that prescription, and how many people have had an issue so far. Okay, now this is really bad because I don't know how it works in different countries, but in the UK, there's I mean, I'm sure it's the same in the US as well, but like there's patient like protection, as in only your doctor, I think, is allowed to know what you've been prescribed and sort of, yeah, well, I mean, like, you know, what your issues are. A pharmacist isn't allowed to. The pharmacist obviously knows what to give you and what you've been prescribed. Sorry, of course they do, but they don't know what's wrong with you, what you're suffering with. I don't think. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't think they're allowed to know. There must be some sort of privacy agreement in every single country. Otherwise, it would just be a bit weird. But yeah, the fact that this person isn't new and has been doing it for ages and is then questioning like what medication you're on, that it's too much, even though it's been sent, I presume, from a doctor to them. It's so weird. I mean, usually I think the doctor just sends what you need to the pharmacy, then you go and pick it up and that's it. No questions. You just say your name and you get what you need. This is mad and very, very, you know, invasive actually. I'm already diabetic. I used to work at a doctor's office where drug reps would bring us lunch and breakfast fairly often, and sometimes coffee and donuts too. I was the only type 1 diabetic in the office. Sometimes, if I'd ridden my bike to work, and OP has chosen to include a bike emoji here just so we know exactly what they're talking about, I would choose to have one of the donuts that the drug reps brought in. I'd check my blood sugar, Google the exact carbohydrate count of the donut, give my insulin, then wait 5 to 10 minutes to eat so my insulin and the sugar would take effect around the same time. But OP, are you allowed to have all that sugar? You've got diabetes, one of the nurses would exclaim. A woman whose desk job did not help her 5'4" self drop enough weight to get off metformin, as she ate her 3 donuts and drank her morning extra large Mountain Dew. I'm allowed. I followed my doctor's orders specifically to have something sugary both before and after an exercise, was my response for several weeks. Finally though, I added, besides, I've already got diabetes. Unlike you, I can't give it to myself. She finally stopped. Well, thankfully, OP, you work in medical care where she can get that burn checked out. So there we go. Drop me a comment down below. Which of those was your favorite revenge story? Which was the most insane? Which was the most professional? I suppose it is r/ProRevenge after all. It isn't nuclear revenge, it's pro-revenge for a reason. So yeah, get your comments in. What do you think? And I'll catch you in 2025 with some even more insane pro-revenge stories.